Keep your shoes on, Larry.
Good morning, everybody. And for those who are watching the live stream, welcome to the open session part of the Community Service Associates Board of Directors meeting of September 29, 2020. I'd like to call the board meeting started at 9:30 and we went into an executive session. I'd like to call the meeting back to order. We have a quorum. Sandra, can you confirm that we had a quorum?
Yes, we did have a quorum.
Okay, great. I want to announce first, in addition to welcoming everyone, I want to remind folks that we are taking questions at comments@csacpines.com. We'll be taking those questions from you. We've been taking them for several days and we will continue taking them through the adjournment of the meeting, at which point we will, having adjourned, we'll take a 5 to 7 minute recess and then we'll come back and answer all the questions. I also want to note that as is often the case, including myself, we sometimes write comments followed by a question. In order to keep these the board meeting on a timely schedule, we will answer all questions. If you have comments, we're going to direct them back to the board. They will be read and considered by the board as comments would be. So please, if you would like comments, that's great, but try and keep your questions to questions. At this morning's executive session reviewing certain legal matters, the board ratified the decision to appeal the trial court's ruling in the Advocate versus CSA case. I know that some property owners have voiced frustration that we've chosen to appeal, and I wanted to provide a few more facts about the matter that will hopefully help property owners in understanding our decision. First, there's been a question as to who is paying for the legal fees. I want to assure you that our insurance carrier is covering our legal fees for the trial and for the initial appeal phases of this case. Because there was some concern that we were spending money that could be better used for other purposes, this is not the case. Second, you should know that the trial judge did not simply tell us to hand over the 2018 gate agreement. Rather, he made several findings of law with regard to the disclosure of the gate agreement that, if we left them standing, could also apply to many of our other third-party agreements and records. The opinion is in the public record if you'd like to see the breadth of his order and how it could impact many more documents than the gate agreement. You can go to the Beaufort County court system to find it. Because our ability to negotiate favorable private contracts often requires that we maintain the final terms confidential, allowing his interpretation of the law to stand could significantly impact our operations. Since our counsel believes the judge's rulings are simply wrong on the law, we decided and found it extremely important to appeal those findings to avoid the precedential impact of his decision. So hopefully that will answer some of the questions that were raised in letters to me and on Facebook as to why we decided to appeal. With that, I'd like to move on to ratify the approval of the Board of Directors meeting minutes of May 28, 2020. Is there a motion? Do we have any questions with regard to the minutes? Hearing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
That's a move.
Bill Johnson seconded. Any objection? If not, everyone approving the minutes, please raise your hands. The motion is approved. Before we get into the meat of the meeting, I did want to not only welcome everyone, but point out how important today's meeting is. As anyone who's been following our board meetings and my letters and correspondence to the community knows, when I took over as chairman, I was dedicated to performing what I believe is a very strong mandate from the community to find the funds necessary to satisfy our unsatisfied needs to repair and replace our slowly but surely failing critical infrastructure. This has importance not only in fixing the infrastructure, but in bringing our community back to the high quality that it was intended to be and that slowly but surely has the potential for being lost. I am very pleased today to tell you that the board hopefully will come to a decision as to how we are going to find those long-term funds. You remember at our last meeting, we actually decided to go into our reserves to start the process of fixing the infrastructure, but the reserves are not going to meet the long-term needs. So today is an important meeting for the community in that we are in fact going to hopefully find the long-term solution to our funding requirements. And I am very pleased at how hard the board has worked. In that regard, we're going to be making decisions today that probably are not going to be popular with everyone. We've spent 6 months of hard work. We've considered virtually every alternative that was proposed to us by the community that we could think of. So I ask you, as you're hearing what we're going to be doing today, not to have a visceral reaction to what you hear, but rather to take the time to study it as we did before you make your decisions. We're going to provide you all the facts and information we have, and if we don't have it and you want more, we'll find it. But when you're making your decisions, please take the time to do the kind of studying that we did before you make up your mind. It's easy to make a visceral decision to things you've heard from others, to rumors, to innuendos, to things you've heard about what happened elsewhere. But we are very satisfied, and I hope the board will come to a conclusion today, that what we've decided has been done with great education, with hard work, and considering all the facts. And all I'm asking the community to do is to give us the time to make the same analysis before you make your decision. So with that, I will turn it over to our president, Sam Bennett.
Well, Larry, I'm going to lean in since you won't give me the camera.
I'll give you the camera.
Thank you very much. I'd like to tell the board and the community, first of all, it's been an amazing 8 months as president. Not what we entirely expected with COVID, but it has been fun, it's been challenging. And what I really wanted to focus my remarks on this morning are the CSA employees and the work they've done over the last 8 months, and primarily since the last board meeting. It has been an unusual summer for Sea Pines, but it's one that the CSA employees have done an exceptional job of adapting to. We started the summer out less than busy, but we finished the summer out very busy, and we continue to be busy with our property owners being on site and with our guests coming through. So if you see the employees out, the folks that are keeping the ditches clean and the drains open, providing the security, please take a moment and thank them. They've been working hard through the summer, through the COVID, and have adapted and have kept Sea Pines moving for us. So I've got more remarks as it relates to Revenue Task Force and the things we want to do in the future and how we're going to address the challenges ahead of us, and how we're excited about addressing those challenges and continuing to make Sea Pines the place we all want to live and to own in. So, Mr. Chairman, I'll just leave it at that, and I look forward to our conversation. I look forward to the director updates so they can go into detail about the things they've been doing for the community.
Thanks, Sam. Next on the agenda is the director updates. Let me start with Amanda. Amanda's going to come on. There you are. If you can unmute, thank you.
Can you guys hear me? Good morning. Thank you, Sam, and to Larry, and to the rest of the board as well. Appreciate it. Good morning to everyone viewing via live stream on YouTube as well. Again, my name is Amanda Jones. I'm the CSA Director of Communications. As Sam mentioned, it's been a busy summer for CSA as well as for the Communications Department. We are actively working with our IT and our admin department to continue to provide additional services through our website. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, I encourage you to visit www.seapinesliving.com/request. That's a page where you can request replacement ID cards, replacement IDs or decals, as well as request additional maintenance services from Sea Pines CSA. So certainly working hard to make sure everybody has access to that through our website. The Communications Department has also been taking steps to reformat our weekly email communications. You may have seen that typically we're sending those out on Fridays. We are trying to push that send time up just a little earlier, looking for a Thursday afternoon or a Friday morning send. That way staff has more time to be able to respond to inquiries or questions that the property owners or members may have. We also are working to reformat that listing as well to include easier to read formats, articles that push to our website to have and provide more details to members, and then also including more photos of the hardworking team that Sea Pines CSA staff are working on our projects, the things that we take care of every week for you. It is board election season in Sea Pines. The CSA Board of Directors election information is posted on our website at seapinesliving.com/CSA elections. I encourage you to take a look at that page if you haven't done so. Some upcoming deadlines. Our deadline to nominate by petition is October 1st. So if you're planning on submitting a petition, please get it to us by that time frame. That needs to be delivered to 175 Greenwood Drive or to Sandra Archer, our executive administrator, by that October 1st deadline. Ballots for CSA's Board of Director elections will be mailed out on November 1st, and they are due back per our bylaws by December 1st. So be on the lookout for those if you're a CSA member. Our annual meeting has been set for October 27th. If you can save the date, that's at 10 o'clock in the morning. Because of COVID this year, the meeting will be live streamed via YouTube, similar to how we're hosting this meeting today. Proxies mailed out to CSA members last week on Wednesday, the 23rd of September. If you are a member and don't see your proxy in the mail by sometime around tomorrow or the day after, please reach out to CSA staff and we can go ahead and get your replacement taken care of. We do ask that you return your proxy to 175 Greenwood Drive, either by mail or in person. We have a drop box at the front office by October 14th, so we can ensure quorum is met to hold the meeting. And as always, if you need to reach staff, feel free to give us a call at 843-671-1343, or you can always email us at info@csacpines.com. That's my report, Larry.
Thank you, Amanda.
You're welcome.
Appreciate that. Next is our Finance Administration, Victoria.
Good morning, everyone. First, for the Finance Department, quickly go over, we're working on the 2021 budget. It's obviously a little more challenging than normal during a pandemic. Speaking of pandemic, I wanted to review the gate revenues, and the gate revenue year over year, and this is updated through yesterday, we are down 44,506 passes from where we were this time last year. And that equates to $446,339. Interestingly, that the month of September has been up, in fact, has been up by 30%. So I'm not sure if that's just the delay in the school opening or maybe better weather. I'm not sure what to attribute that. So of that 44,000 down, the daily gate passes are down 24.4%, and commercial are down 5.7%. As far as the administration department, we have hired a new human resources administrator. Her name is Bridie Forbes. She started on August the 26th, and she's doing so great. She basically came in here and said, kind of, show me where my office is, and I want to start working. So that's exactly what she's done. She's dove right in, and we're really happy to have her. We're working on insurance renewals, and also for the administration department, we've had great success in software conversion. We were able to, effective September 1st, we were able to convert all of our accounts receivable software right into our enterprise-wide, so there's not two separate systems, so I'm not having, or my staff's not having to do double entry. So your invoices this year are going to look a little bit different, but that's just due to a better system that is way more efficient and more effective for us. So thank you to Stephen Vincent-Guerra. He's worked so hard to get us where we are. So we really need to say thank you to him. And finally, we're working on security software. We're down to 2 vendors that we're looking at for both gate software as well as security patrol. And we're working to make sure that those 2 softwares will integrate with our system. That's where we are. Thanks.
Thank you, Victoria. I know you'll be back if necessary with David for Daisy on the finance update. Next is our maintenance, enhancement, and major projects, Russell Fredericks. And this is one I know we're all looking forward to. I certainly.
Well, I think JR is actually on the line there.
No, but this is the director.
Oh, I'm sorry. JR, I apologize. Yeah.
Go ahead, Russell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Sam. And good morning, everyone. Pleased to be speaking to you today, and I hope you and your families are safe and well, as this has been a trying season for everyone. I know it has been for me. Certainly in Sea Pines, our maintenance staff has been incredibly busy with mulch deliveries, signs, mailbox repairs, and many other items. As Sam mentioned, keeping our ditches and drainage moving and flowing as it should. Despite some of those efforts, and we'll talk about those later, our drainage system does continue to be impacted by rainfall events, especially this past spring. I do want to mention, before I get into some of those details, some of the things that we do have planned for this fall. We do have a leisure trail and roadway pothole repairs planned. As it was mentioned earlier, it's been an incredibly busy season out there. So we've had to hold off on some of that repair work, again, what we refer to as the slower season in Sea Pines. We do plan on striping some additional leisure trails, as well as adding roadway reflectors in many areas. Regarding the drainage work, as many of you have seen as you're up and down Sea Pines Drive, we've been working hand in hand with the town of Hilton Head on many repairs. Earlier this season, we made repairs in South Beach Lane. We're currently working in proximity to Beach Walk number 25 and Snowy Egret, where we had numerous failures in the drainage system. We also completed work in South Beach, extensive work in proximity to Sea Pines Drive, where we had, again, numerous failures in a very deteriorated drainage pipe that was in that area. We have work planned in the upcoming weeks at Canvasback Road, Battery Road, and again in South Beach. The town also has plans to make additional repairs at Lawton Canal Pump Station that includes the construction of a new pump house to hold a new backup generator for the pump station, as well as many other components. The town's been working hand in hand with CSA throughout the summer in these efforts, and I certainly applaud the town in working so closely with us to make this happen. As we know, the Lawton Canal Pump Station is essential, especially during times of inclement weather, hurricanes, and other storm events. Our drainage crew has been, again, busy with these multiple failures throughout the community. We do have planned work for additional pipe jetting and cleaning of our pipe ends in many areas of the community again this fall. Other things that are on our list to catch up on from, again, a very busy season is tree care and the pruning and care of trees on our main roadways throughout the community, as well as some leisure trails. Our infamous flower change out is scheduled for the first week in November, and this will be a more robust flower change out than our last one a few weeks ago. We'll make those flowers available in Lot 1, as we've done in the past. A project that we've received many questions on is the Greenwood Drive Leisure Trail, particularly the section by the Lawton Stables. We're scheduled to start work on this in the upcoming weeks with our contractor. We plan on realigning the leisure trail in that area, as well as resurfacing and milling, paving the leisure trail from that area of Plantation Drive and Greenwood down to the Sea Pines and Greenwood intersection. We'll be installing additional pull-off pads in proximity to the leisure trail kiosk. Again, this will be a much improved experience for bike riders and walkers and runners alike in our community. We'll also be constructing a new railing at the Baynard Cove outfall in proximity to South Beach Lane. As you pass by Sea Pines Drive, you can see this railing is in very, very poor condition as we speak. This summer, we also completed the Sea Pines Drive survey from Lighthouse Road to Land's End, so we have this information for future infrastructure projects that are necessary for the community. I know in JR's report, he'll speak more about our 2021 projects, but I do want to mention that we've been very busy with our engineering on North Sea Pines Drive, as Larry mentioned earlier. North Sea Pines Drive, and as JR will follow up with some additional comments, is the oldest roadway in Sea Pines. It is the primary entrance that was used for multiple years, and it was a dirt road, and it was served as the main gateway into the community long before there was a Greenwood gate. This roadway was largely constructed as the community continued to grow. As you may imagine, the infrastructure of the roadway itself and the drainage is in need of desperate repairs. And our engineering has confirmed that through some investigations that we have executed in the roadway. There's a variety of construction methods that were used in the 1950s when this road was built. So again, our engineering is well along, and JR will comment to the necessary plans that we need to put in place for the construction in the future. But again, regarding the drainage, many of those T streets that connect into North Sea Pines Drive, all that drainage does flow in proximity to the lagoons between the golf course and Sea Pines Drive. Many of those drainage pipes are failing as we speak and have failed over the last couple of years. So again, I do want to underscore the need to execute this project in a timely manner in the upcoming months ahead, as the roadway itself is largely failed due to that variety of construction back in the early 1950s. Other things that we are working on with that project and some of the goals are to improve traffic flow and safety, improve the drainage, as I mentioned, stabilize the roadbed, and improve access and connections between and across Sea Pines Drive between the beach walks and properties on the opposite side of the road. So again, these are some of the highlights of that project, and I'll certainly turn to when JR makes his comments to expand on that. That concludes my report for this morning, Larry.
Thank you very much, Russell. Very, very helpful. Next on the list is Operations and Special Projects, David Henderson. David.
Thank you, Larry. Good morning. Just wanted to provide the board with a couple quick COVID operational updates. Access to the inside of the administration building remains controlled. We do continue to receive documentation for decals, ID cards, etc. Via email, and then pickups are made at the door and are scheduled by appointment. If anyone should not have access to a computer or are having any difficulties with getting us the necessary information online, we ask that they contact us so we can assist them with that process. The community center remains closed. However, we have begun providing access on a case-by-case basis when the activity, the group size, the desired room configuration, etc., are compatible with all COVID-19 guidelines and requirements. The pavilion at Tower Beach is open, but we have not been accepting group reservations to this point. However, going forward, we will be reviewing reservation requests on a case-by-case basis in order to promote compliance with all COVID-19 requirements. A couple issues related to the Forest Preserve and the foundation. The pandemic has forced the cancellation of the Forest Preserve Spring fundraiser, the Party in the Pines, the upcoming community yard sale next month, and the bonfire in November are also being canceled. The annual solicitation letter has been mailed and should be received soon. In lieu of the circumstances, we are kindly asking everyone to consider supporting our natural treasure during these unprecedented times. If you do not receive a letter by the end of next week, please let us know. Also would like to mention that the 2021 calendar is now available. Contributors of $75 or more will receive a copy of the calendar, and they also will be available for purchase at CSA for $10. The Sea Pines Forest Preserve Foundation is the owner of the Beach Trust property, which is generally located between the seaward property lines of oceanfront properties and the mean high tide line. The foundation has received a permit that allows additional sand fencing and dune vegetation within the Beach Trust. Oceanfront property owners interested in working under this permit should contact me for additional details. Lastly, I'd like to update the board on Russian thistle, which is an exotic invasive plant that has recently been discovered growing on the open beach. Approximately 2 weeks ago, Sea Pines CSA maintenance employees and community volunteers assisted the town of Hilton Head in removing thistle plants between beach markers 33A and 16. The town has completed its work in Sea Pines, and future Russian thistle growth will need to be monitored. That concludes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, David. For those who have not been down the beach, we did get a number of volunteers from the community to help pick up this thistle, which apparently, if it continued to grow, would be a real danger to people walking on the beach in terms of the thorn. So we want to thank those people who volunteered to help the town do that. I assume it's going to be an ongoing project, and more volunteers will be needed as we get there. Next, last of the director updates is Toby McSwain, Safety, Security, and Transportation. Toby.
Good morning, everyone. I would like to start with a personnel update. Over the past several months, we have hired 5 new gate personnel as well as 5 new patrol officers. We currently have 1 opening remaining to be filled in the patrol section. We are in the process of completing their training and hope to have all their certifications completed over the next several months. Since our manpower shortage in the patrol division, we have gone to a 12-hour rotation shift for the officers so that we could adequately cover the property as needed. We're hoping to transition back to an 8-hour shift here within the next couple of weeks. Our calls for service are starting to decline. We're about 400 fewer calls for the month of September than we were in August. The highest remaining calls that we've had so far have been really wildlife calls, noise complaints, improper parking, and ARB and covenant violations. Security administration update that David mentioned a little bit earlier. They're busy. It is by appointment only, and they have been operating by appointment only since March. We do ask the owners to go to cpinesliving.com/requests to fill out a request for any service that they may need. Normally, we all have their request completed that day, and if it's a decal or an ID card, that kind of stuff, it's normally ready that day where the owner can come by and pick those things up. The Welcome Center. Welcome Center update. The passes are down for 2020, which you would kind of expect from the pandemic. In 2019, we did issue a little over 300,000 passes from the Welcome Center, which is about an 840 pass average a day. This year, our slowest month, surprisingly, was in April, where we distributed only 11,000 passes for the month. Which is about 391 passes on a daily average. The highest month was in June, which was 38,000 passes, which was an average of about 1,200 passes a day being issued. These numbers do include property owner guest passes in light of the pandemic. The property owners have continued to call in passes for their friends. Our lowest month for guest passes for the owners was in April. We issued 4,800 property owner guest passes in April, and the highest was in June, and we did 9,600 guest passes for the owners in June. Moving on to Tower Beach. Tower Beach, we had a good season for the beach this year. With the exception really of a handful of days, we got close to running out of some parking spaces. And some days we did run out, but we concluded the officer on September 7th, Labor Day. The gate officer was pulled from Tower Beach for the remainder of the season. And moving forward, Tower Beach will continue to be monitored by the patrol division as needed. We also concluded our trolley operations, and in light of the pandemic, you can imagine the trolley numbers in comparison to last year were way down. In 2019, all in, that's including the beach, moving everyone, we moved 92,000 people in 2019 utilizing the trolley during the trolley season. This year, all in total, we moved 18,000. So we moved 74,000 less people this year than we did last year. The beach shuttle, last year we moved to right at 16,000 people to the Sea Pines Beach Club. This year it was only 8,700. So it wasn't a tremendous year by any stretch. We did utilize the trolleys as necessary. We were running at a 50% capacity, but all in all, it was a good trolley season. I know that Victoria mentioned our administrative software. We are making some headway with the vendors. With our consultant, we do need to make sure that we are compatible with the 2 vendors that we have selected, and we really need to make a decision of what direction we're going here in the next month, so we can start with implementation and testing before we get into the next year. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have for now.
Thank you, Toby. Sam?
So, Mr. Chairman, board, again, I'd like to thank the directors and their staff for all the hard work. We get a lot of interaction with the community, both face-to-face, socially distanced when we're out in the field, but also through telephone calls and emails. And we do our absolute best to get back to guests, property owners, residents, full-time residents, part-time residents, second home residents, and just appreciate the work of the staff doing that. If an owner has questions, comments, concerns, please email us, call us, reach out to us. We will do our very best to get back to you in short order and address whatever concern or idea or thought you may have as it relates to how we run CPINE CSA. So thank you very much.
And I'd just like to note, given the pandemic, given what is the rest of the schedule for the rest of the year in early 2021, we'll probably continue to essentially combine what were the community events, monthly community events, and what will become monthly board meetings. So for those who are listening and who may see this video later, just be aware that we're trying to be efficient and recognizing that we can't have everyone in person, and we're using these Zooms. We're going to try and combine these methods, and hopefully you'll find it useful. It will also avoid some duplication of committee reports with director reports in the same month. So with that, I again want to remind folks that we are taking questions at comments at csacpines.com. If you have any questions for the staff based on the reports you've just heard, please send them along. If Sam can't answer them, he'll be able to provide them to the appropriate staff director, so you will get an answer. So please continue to send those questions if you have them. With that, I'm going to turn it over to our treasurer, Dave Borghese, for our finance report.
Thank you, Larry. Under the agenda with finance update, I'd like to start with item B, which is the Elliott Davis report. Elliott Davis, they are independent outside auditors, and this is a report that was in your package. This is an annual report that's given every year. It's required by accounting principles for our CPA to issue this report. It's similar to prior year's reports, and I don't believe that there's anything in there that is significantly different than what we've seen. So if you do have any questions, if you do take the opportunity to actually review and read it and have questions, please forward those to me, and I will make sure that those get answered and that we would have the appropriate communication with our contacts at Elliott Davis. Second item is really has to do with the August 31 year-to-date financial statements. They're unaudited. They were in your packet. I think that it's reasonably clear that Victoria has indicated where we have budget variances that are, I think, well explained. It also gives a very good update with respect to the MEMP, that would be the major repairs and replacements, where we stand through August. And I think Russell did a very good job of updating us as to what's probably going to happen within the next 3 to 5 months with respect to continuation of completion of those projects. From the standpoint of the financial statements themselves, I'd like to make just one comment, and that has to do with the under other income. It's called loan forgiveness, and it's $1.1 million. This is the PPP loan from the Small Business Administration that we received very early on in the pandemic timeframe, in which allowed us to maintain our payrolls. It is anticipated that that loan forgiveness number will in fact be forgiven. Right now, it still is a loan, but we're accounting for it and accounting for it appropriately because we believe that that entire amount will be forgiven. That said, I can tell you that we need to work through our bank to get to the Small Business Administration, SBA. And as of today, the SBA has not issued a a forgiveness form for us to fill out in order to actually have it legally forgiven. So we're in a waiting period, and the SBA is basically saying they're still waiting for Congress to finalize all the terms of the forgiveness. So we're in a waiting period, but you can see that we did achieve $1 million of governmental assistance, and that's fortunate given the fact that we have had significant loss of gate revenue. At this point in time, unless we have, I'm glad to answer any questions, but let me first move that that the board should accept these year-to-date financial statements, and can we then have any questions?
Is there a second to that motion? So David Pardue is seconded. The motion is on the floor, Mr. Borghese. Are there any questions for Mr. Borghese? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote. All in favor of the motion to approve the financial statements, raise your hand. Any objections? Hearing none, we will move on. Thank you, Mr. Borghese, for that report. And we will move on to the committee updates. Mr. Richardson, you're first with the Architectural Review Board Liaison. Please unmute.
Good morning, everyone. In your package, you have what I'm going to report on. One is the density report, which is basically unchanged. August was relatively busy. We need 4 new single-family residences applied for, 6 major renovations and 48 small renovations, 2 pools, 1 commercial application, 1 new lot approved, 1 demo approved. And for the year, we've been a really busy year considering what's been going on. And the new single family homes, including new lots, is 26. That's about 200% more than what we normally would do. Major renovations, 44, small, 400. So pools, 19, commercial applications, 10, 6 new lots improved, 2 demos. So it's really a busy time for the ARB, but it's moving relatively smoothly. And we are later in the meeting. I don't know whether you want to do this now or later about changing up. We have some new members coming on, and there's a couple of people going off. Larry, would you like to do that now, or would you like to do it later?
Let's do that under new business, JR.
Okay, great. That would be my report. Unless there are questions.
Thank you, JR. Any questions for JR? Seeing none, we'll move on to Mr. Ellis and the Communications Committee.
I think if I said anything, it would be a repeat primarily of what Amanda has said and some of the comments you've said. So rather than go through that, I just would reiterate that there is substantial change being made to the way messages are going out. And you will see a change in this meeting with an open discussion later on a very important point. And there's really nothing else that I can add to what's been said. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Ellis? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Finance Committee. Mr. Borghese. Go over.
There we go. Finance Committee did meet approximately a week ago. Reported that with respect to our investments and cash, we are very liquid and have the ability to pay for major project costs for North Sea Pines Drive reconstruction. There would be no need to liquidate any of our investments because of the cash that we have accumulated. Secondly, tax returns have been received from our CPA firm, and Victoria is in the process of reviewing those. And finally, we discussed insurance renewals that are coming up. We're now coming into the 4th quarter, and our renewals are January 1. And now is the time that we really need to get going on those. And so we talked about that. We do know that it's a very tight market, and we should expect premiums to increase across all types and types of insurance. And then lastly, our committee did go through where we stood with the MEMP, and that really is nothing more than what you've already heard from Russell today. That would be my report.
Any questions for Mr. Borghese on the Finance Committee?
Question. David, we made the decision to jumpstart the infrastructure repair by using capital reserve. We have a policy that holds a certain reserve level. As you all look and project out the year as we're spending, where do you see us totally within compliance to our reserve policy?
Our reserve policy allows us 3 years to get back in compliance. We would not be in compliance after spending this kind of money.
But we have 3 years to return to that.
Yes, according to the policy.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Borghese? If not, we'll turn to the Gate Entry Committee and Mr. Corbett. Gary?
Good morning. I will report Victoria's report did give an update on where we stand with past revenues and passes sold. The only thing I can add to that is short-term rental passes purchased at the Sea Pines gates up through July were up by 502 passes year over year. And short-term passes from the Welcome Center were also up $39,000, $39,710. So Victoria reported on the overall daily passes being down and so forth. Toby's report to us regarding the trolley operation there again, he brought us up to speed on the amount of trolley ridership from 92,000 down to 18,000 this year. And but we did start with the beach trolley for the short-term renters. We did start that late, and that accounted, along with the pandemic, some of the reasons why the ridership was down. But we didn't start that operation until June the 22nd from Lot 8, and ridership was limited to 50% capacity. So that also contributed. We did have all the sanitation in place and face masks. And there has been a shortage of personnel to drive the trolleys, and that's primarily contributed to the compensation that they receive and just the lack of individuals wanting to drive the trolleys. But Toby's continuing to pursue that for the future. One thing that David Perdue, I'm sure, will probably report on in his report, so I will kind of comment on it with regard to an ongoing discussion about drop-offs throughout the community for beach access drop-off. And so that'll continue to be discussed of whether or not there's other opportunities throughout the community or locations for these drop-off points. Toby and Victoria did report on the software companies that are being interviewed and looking at their reviews to get us back on track with the needed software to run the gate operations and other that got derailed about 9 months to a year ago. There's been an ongoing task force that Don Sigmund's been chairing with regards to the Breeze trolley from the town entering Sea Pines, as well as the possibility to increase bike rental income from the bikes being brought into the community from $1 to $2. This is continuing to be discussed, but primarily because of the pandemic, we've really not kind of moved on these things. And so it's ongoing. We also have another task force chaired by Bill Johnson, and it was really put together by a request from the town to get Sea Pines community's input in the Sea Pines Circle. And so this is being continued on with work with Bill Johnson and his, as well as Sam Bennett and his discussions with the town to try to get us in the direction where we really need to give the input on how we feel versus what the town is trying to pursue on really fixing the issues that we all are dealing with at Sea Pines Circle. The Galleria shops, we have had discussion with regard to possibly hiring a lawyer to look at dealing with trying to get some changes with the policy, the program for us to be able to remove the building and not lose our developmental rights. And so this is ongoing, and Sam is kind of taking some of the lead on this with the town to try to pursue the opportunities there. There is a gate entry policy change that will be forthcoming that was discussed regarding multiple owners of property. I have nothing further to really report on it, but it's really a policy modification to make it better for Sarah and security to deal with multiple owners of property and C-funds and their access to property owner decals and property owner IDs. The committee was also asked to display a sea turtle sign in our trolleys. And this was put forth, and Toby came up with a plan to do this with a decal in the trolleys, and was put into place. Also, we have a resolution today that we'll deal with under new business regarding Hilton Head Prep asked that we would allow parents and students to apply for more than one decal, and they would be charged $6. And the decal must be in the student and or the parent's name. And we will discuss that further in a resolution. It's also recommended that we also include additional decals for full-time staff working in C-Pines. And so if a family they work in C-Pines or their child works in C-Pines, they get a complimentary decal. And should they need another decal, there would be a $6 fee. And that vehicle needs to be registered to the applicant that's asking for that additional decal. A couple of years ago, we had a subcommittee looking at low-speed vehicles. This issue is not going away. It continues to come up. We do have property owners in our community that have the little gym cars, and we have a property owner that has the MOKE, M-O-K-E vehicle, kind of looks like a modified Jeep, but they are low speed to where their maximum speed is 25 miles per hour. There are many other communities that are allowing these. I know that Palmetto Bluff allows both of these, and other communities are as well. Even though we did a survey and it was not did not receive that many positive votes, but still it is something that is continuing to grow in popularity, and we will need to continue looking at is there any opportunity for the use of those in our community. And quickly, that concludes my report, and thank you.
Thank you, Kerry. Thank you for that report. I know we'll be back with some additional resolutions in the new business.
Yes,
next is the governance committee. Mr. Cassidy.
Yeah, good morning. The governance committee has developed a roster of some potential improvements in our processes and practices. And we have been working to put those in a priority format. And we have today a resolution that's included about committee terms. Well, let me just give you a really quick overview of what the agenda has been that we've been working through. The first is we've been working to update the conflict of interest policy to include not only financial, but other business relationships and an appropriate disclosure form, as well as reviewing and updating the confidentiality practices and policies that guide the board. The second is we've been working on a roster for board development, and this includes a number of different tools to include checklists, if you will, that be used in board and committee recruitment that outline kind of targeted skills and characteristics that are desired of prospective members, so that as we're looking to round out rosters of board and committees, we have individuals with the different kinds of mix and background experiences that will enrich the dialogue and enhance the governance processes. We're also looking at potential changes to the orientation of board members and committee members, as well as looking at ways to work with the board on visioning and setting the future direction for governance matters. We also have a very interesting task force within the committee that's developed a concept that's going to require some discussion into the future about how we can, on a regular and routine basis, make improvements to our covenants, improvements to our policies and our practices that really bring us more into modern governance practices. This would require, for example, an ongoing, maybe annual referendum just on basic policy and governance matters, include how we do business, how we interact with various functions, which I think would then we get used to continuously update how we do business. And then last, we've been working on the committees about how to organize them, develop standard charters for committees, a standard approach to develop and produce agenda minutes on a timely basis, maybe allow for mechanisms for Q&A in advance of meetings or after meetings that the community could ask questions of the various committees that could, again, broaden our agenda and improve our inclusiveness of community input. One of the things, though, that is coming forward today as a recommendation from governance is to change the terms of committee. Currently, a committee member is appointed for a year and has opportunity to serve for 6. We think really to allow the continuous renewal of committees, we should go to a staggered term approach of a 3-year term with 2 terms being the maximum you could serve. So in other words, if we would implement this, the committees would turn over by 1/3 about every year. So we would constantly have continuity in membership, but also bring in new voices and new perspectives. So that resolution, I know we're going to take up later in the meeting. So that gives you an overview of what we've been working on with the goal of continuously improving our governance processes and bringing some tools and practices to bear on how we do business. Questions?
Seeing none, thank you, Jim. Thank you very much. Next up, Stu Rodman with the Government Liaison.
Yeah, 3 items to touch on, Mr. Chairman. Update on the 278 corridor, which is the bridge replacement. The State Infrastructure Bank approved $120 million some weeks back, which finalizes, for the most part, the funding. Gives us about $275,000 million that's available at this point in time. Jeff Bradley, our representative, also put forward an interesting concept of salvaging the existing bridges to be used as a linear park. And the numbers are kind of interesting. If you look at the demolition cost and the cost of the savings of taking the bicycle and pedestrian lanes off of the main bridges, you're probably dealing with about $20 million in savings. And then the issues kind of come down to who's going to own it and what are the future liabilities and how does it connect with the road system. But I thought a good catch on his part. The schedule at this point in time is they're in the middle of the process. They identified a variety of alternatives. They're in January. They're supposed to provide the recommended or preferred alternative. If you read between the lines and you look at the factors that they're basing it on, for all practical purposes, it looks like they would build a new 6-lane bridge to replace the 4 existing 2-lane bridges, and that it would actually come through on the current alignment through the area that's called Stony, down starting really at where the Crazy Crab is, all the way down to the connection with the Cross Island. So that's probably what's going to happen. There's been a certain amount of pushback in the community and from the town in terms of the design through that Stony area, because they continue to look at it as at grade. And what that means is you just keep adding signals and lanes and pavement. And so it starts to look like, a Myrtle Beach, which most people obviously are very concerned about. The joint forces, some of you may know Tom Sharp, lives in Sea Pines. After he retired from Alcoa, he ran Indiana DOT. We kind of joined forces, kind of looked at that issue, put forward a proposal that what is really needed is one overpass bridging 278 someplace along there, the best location probably being at the Spanish Wells connecting to Wild Horse. And in the course of doing that, you make the entire corridor free flowing. So DOT is evaluating. We'll see what comes out of that. The other piece that's been interesting, the town owns about 50–60% of the land down in that area. And there's a small remaining remnant of the Gullah community that lives there. They call it the Stony community. And people seem to be coming around to the thought that let's take a look from a land planning standpoint of how could we really make that something better, both on the roadside and for the people that live there. And if they do it in a timely manner, the cost of doing that could probably be folded into the corridor project. So I think it's kind of moving forward. I think one big question is on the table in many people's minds, and I've incorporated it in a scope of work for the people to look at. And that is that the growth on the traffic is looking at about 40% over the next 25 years. And since we're close to build out, many people are questioning, gee, does that make any sense? On the other hand, you've got a lot of growth off island, Hardyville, Bluffton, and of course we become somewhat the beach for those folks. So hopefully we'll get an answer to that earlier, because that drives a lot of the cost equations that go forward. So S278. Secondly, as I've said in the past, we more than likely will end up with a penny sales tax for transportation related items in 2022. That's something to be put together in the next couple months. It'll be heavily in the Bluffton area because 170 is failing and needs to be widened as Hardyville grows. And the issue for us will be if it's heavily outside of Hilton Head, they will need some things to balance a referendum to get it passed. So it's an opportunity for the town and for us to take a look at, particularly at the Sea Pines Circle. If you were to take the growth projections that they're using on the bridge, and then conventional wisdom is there'll be some amount of traffic that will shift to the Cross Island once the toll comes off next year. You clearly could project that the Sea Pines Circle is going to fail. So we really do as a community, even if we need to spend a little bit more money, come up with a solution, because I would not bank on the town being able to come up with that solution. Lastly, you probably followed that the county imposed a fee for the sheriff's services on the town. The town has sued. The auditor who runs the tax bills balked at it, so the town is suing him, and the county is asking that both cases be joined and be expedited because there's a request for injunctions. I thought it was kind of silly, nutty what the county did and voted against it, but anyway, it did pass. We'll see what happens. Incidentally, for us, our cost would actually probably go down because we would pay a lot more in property taxes for the money that is currently being distributed than we would if that uniform fee is spread on a uniform basis across the town. But anyway, see what happens. Stay tuned. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Stu. Okay, next is Land Use Management Committee. Mr. Spear isn't here, but I can provide just a brief update because those members who may have attended the ASPO meeting know Land Use Management Committee has completed its review and revision and redraft of the land use management rules that govern our property, maintaining our properties to an appropriate neighborhood standard, and also short-term rental rules. They have gone to the ASPO board. The ASPO board has recommended them to us. They've asked us to review them and to provide any comments if we have any back to ASPO before they actually adopt them. So I'm going to ask, we've circulated those. If you all can take a look at them, if you do have comments, please get them back to Rich and Sam and me, and we can then figure out how to present them to ASPO. ASPO probably will adopt them, some form of them at their November meeting. And I'm anticipating that in the absence of strong objection, we will take action on those rules, adopt or otherwise, at our November meeting. So please take the time to review them. A lot of work has gone into them. The major improvements are to consolidate and revise those rules that were not clear, and to add an enforcement mechanism in the nature of fines and forfeitures for those homeowners who, after appropriate warnings, have not complied with land use management rules. But again, we're not taking them up yet. I ask you to review them. Let us know if you have particular concerns that we can pass along, and the committee can decide what they want to do with those. And then we hopefully will take them up in November. That's when,
do we want to discuss the charter?
That's land use management. That's land use management. Next is MEMP. Mr. Richardson again.
Good morning again. I think Russell covered most of the things, and for certainly the detail of which that committee gets involved in, and our wonderful crew that runs it. But I thought I would just talk 2 seconds about our infrastructure and what our plans are for the coming 15 months or so, using some of the funds that the board has borrowed from our savings to move forward projects. And they're kind of run in the order of which they're in importance. And one of the Russell touched on is North Sea Pines Drive construction resurfacing. It's a complicated situation because this road was put in, it's probably the first road that ever got put in, and it's been repaved several times, but never put in properly. And so we're in the process of doing surveying, about to finish that. And that's the North Sea Pine from the gate to Lighthouse Road is the project. And it should be done sometime next year. And it's going to be an interesting logistical situation, but it's something that really has to be done. Part of it is about the beautification and of the entrance to Sea Pines, which is really important to our significance and insignificance in the sense that we're a world-class community and we have caving roads. So that's the big one. The next one is, he touched on also, the drainage ditch maintenance, which is extremely important because of all the rains and water that we have and the pipes caving in. And we just have to work on that as best we can with the money we have. And item 3 is the Lighthouse Road Leisure Trail, which is going to be on another leisure trail on the other side of the road of Lighthouse Road. And that is also a project that we think is very important because it's the most used road by tourists and residents going back and forth to Harbor Town and the beach. And then finally, and 4th is some
JR, you're frozen. I'm going to give it a couple seconds. Let's move on, and when JR comes back, we'll finish his report. Let's move on to Bill Johnson and safety and security. JR, if you can hear us, you're frozen. You may need to resume in. Bill?
Good morning. Safety and security, a lot of the issues that we discussed at our September 8th meeting were already touched on by Toby. But when we came on this year, when I came on in chairing this committee, there was a commitment, my primary goal, to make certain we gave Toby the resources to fully staff and create a premier security operation, one that he would be very, very proud of. So therefore, that's our overwhelming objective as we move forward. And as Toby reported, we've made some great strides. He's been able to make some additional hires, and I feel very, very good about this. COVID has presented some unique issues for Sea Pines. One of them is people aren't flying as much as they used to. There's a reluctance to hop on an airplane, and that's led to the RV industry exploding. Many property owners have contacted us asking for some solution for short-term parking in Sea Pines. The existing policy only authorizes a Sea Pines property owner 4 hours of access with their RV to load and unload their vehicle, and then they have to take it off premises. So we're looking at the possibility of identifying a lot where a property owner that does come here with an RV would have access to park it a little more longer term. Couple of other issues that we talked about. Currently, our speed limit says our policy is in 35 miles per hour unless otherwise stated. And it was brought up that we should consider stating that our speed limit is 25 miles per hour unless otherwise stated, which the majority of our roads are of 25 miles per hour. So that was an interesting comment. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, we brought up the issue of recreational drone usage. Currently, the Sea Pines Resort and some other individual regimes have banned drone usage by our visitors. And that was something that we wanted to explore as to whether we should try to ban recreational drone usage in Sea Pines as a whole. So I will be more than happy to take any questions if anybody has them, but that's my report.
Any questions for Bill? Scott?
Yeah, I just want to know, Bill, what was the, what did the committee, is that something the committee's ready to push out and get a vote on, or are you still talking?
I think we're still talking about it. Wanted to get some feedback from some of the other committees. As we're all aware, there's so much overlap between committee to committee that has impact. And so we're reaching out to short-term rental with David Pardue and getting their input on this also.
Did y'all talk about at all maybe having it a permit process? If we allow it to continue, that they have to get a permit, pay whatever.
Well, I think that's
something CSA, because I mean, it's a safety issue too. There's a lot of people, there's a growing concern of, people's homes being filmed and things like that. And we've got obviously mega homes and people don't like it. They don't like drones flying over their houses. So,
well, there's a commercial usage that's currently, the real estate community uses drones all the time to take footage of homes that they put on the market. Various marketing efforts by either the resort or CSA have utilized drones. So we're talking about just the recreational guy that goes online and buys a $140 drone, and he's flying around, public areas and over your backyard. And we're trying to see if it would be possible for us to collectively unify as a community to establish a ban on those.
Any other questions? Thank you, Bill.
Just a comment, a couple of comments, Larry.
Steve Birdwell, go ahead.
Yeah, Bill, I'm glad to hear you talk about the commercial use, because I think there should be a process for applying for a permit, because there are a lot of uses for realtors. Of course, we do drones. I know many others need some drone images, and we would want that to continue. Also, CBS Sports, as you know, brought in a group of drones for the tournament this year, and I would expect them to be doing that in the future as well. And then on the RVs, I think wherever this lot is, it really needs to be hidden away. I don't think it would be good to have a line of RVs parked at lot 1 or one of these lots that you would see right off of Greenwood Drive as you enter the community.
Okay, appreciate your comment. Any additional questions?
I'm sorry. Thank you, Bill. I was on mute. I know these are really interesting questions that come up. It's just part of our new world of things like drones and RVs that we really do need to get a handle on and get what's in the home property owner's best interest in all cases. So thank you for taking those issues. JR, if you're back and unfrozen, would you like to complete your report?
Sorry about that. I don't know if my computer went blank on me, which I don't know much about anyway. So No, I was really to the end. Those are the 4 issues that I thought were important for us to bring up because we're going to be spending a lot of time and effort and money doing those 4 things this coming 15 months. So I was going to open it up for questions if anybody had some questions. In that case, I turn any time back to you, Larry.
Thank you, J.R. And it was a great profile in your frozen, so at least you should know that. Next is short-term rental and David Pardue.
Thank you, Larry. First off, short-term rental committee has not taken up the issue of drones, but speaking personally, I realize that there are a lot of commercial interest and uses of drones, but the commercial people who use drones aren't the problem, in my opinion. As a frequent beach walker, I'm just very discouraged to see the use of drones on the beach, particularly because they're very fast. I mean, I don't know the speed limit on, I mean, how fast they go, but they appear to be going 40 or 50 miles an hour, maybe faster. And just from a safety point of view on the beach, I just think they should be strongly discouraged. I'm not really sure how we can totally regulate that, but I would certainly support the regulations against drone usage by our short-term rentals. But anyway, getting to the short-term rental committee, we had a very successful year with short-term rentals, in spite of the fact, Victoria said that our total gate passes were way down, but the decrease in the gate passes were pretty much just for the day trippers. The gate passes sold of short-term rental people were either even or up from last year. The second thing is that just from a personal observation perspective, it appears to me that our short-term renters this year were perhaps a little bit more affluent than our short-term rental people in the past. I don't have any statistics to prove that, but just seeing the renters and seeing our visitors and guests on the beach and seeing them come in and all, they appeared to be a little bit more affluent than what we've had. The short-term rental committee continues to talk about the logistic problems of getting our renters to and from the beach. But frankly, it's more talk than action because nobody's figured out a good solution to it. We've got, it's been great that the resort accommodated the short-term rentals for a while. And of course, the prep was very good and allow us to park there. But still, we don't have any long-term solution for short-term rentals to drop off their families at the beach. So the continuing logistics of figuring that out are certainly a challenge. The only really new thing that I haven't reported yet in short-term rentals is that we have discussed perhaps for next year setting up what we've been referring to as a beach ambassador program. And that would be basically having volunteers similar to the bike ambassadors, having volunteers to work, let's say, maybe Saturday afternoon and Sunday morning at the beach club or maybe the Monarch or whatever, helping our visitors understand what the beach rules are. I think we want to stay away from somebody out there, being too strict on things and being out a tourist and all that. But if we can do it in a way that's still tourist friendly from an educational point of view, we may be recommending something like that in the future. But that's still a ways off. And if anybody has any ideas on that, then pass them on to me and we'll discuss them in committee. I see Steve's hand up.
Steve Burwell.
Yeah, David, there's actually a resolution that's in the package, and I wanted to know more about the need for the program. And if the beach club is a place where you plan to put these ambassadors, have there been problems at the beach? Because we're not aware of any problems. No one's talked to us about it, a particular problem that would be at the beach club.
Well, I think Larry, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the resolution has been pulled from our packet, from our agenda today. And we're really just in the early stages of of this. We have not talked to the resort. We haven't talked to the Monarch. It's just, we're in the early stages of just discussing whether it would be a good idea or not. That's really where we are. So I appreciate your perspective on that, but as I say, it's just in the very early stages of discussion.
Steve,
Harry may have more.
Steve, we can pull it from the agenda, but the purpose of it is to talk about problems at the beach club is really not, is overbroad. The idea is that many of our short-term renters come out to the beach without any idea that it's important to fill holes. It's important to take your beach stuff away. And again, it's because these are in fact public beaches that they're going to. And if they're used to other places where filling holes and long shovels and all that are not necessities, the idea was much like the bike ambassadors, you simply provide someone or people at the entrance to the beach, and whether it's the beach club with your approval or Monarch or one of the other entrances, to tell our friends as they're going out there are rules, could you please do it? Now, we know we have a sign there, but if anyone's been on any of the beaches, yours, the beach clubs and others, at the end of the day, there are still an awful lot of holes and an awful lot of stuff left. So the idea was, could we provide a volunteer group who would on Monday, Sunday, Monday, Saturday, whenever, as the first influx of new short-term renters comes in, provide extra help in explaining what our rules are and a simple ask that they be aware of them. So I don't think it's a matter of problems in the sense of crowd control or anything like that. It's more a matter of helping our community do better. And I think this was as much a reaction to the occasional Facebook and other concerns that we see, notwithstanding everything else, new renters come every week. They have no idea. It's very much like bike ambassadors being sent out to remind people that bikers don't have the right of way. They don't know the rules, and therefore they're not really breaking them intentionally. It's with that knowledge. But it's a matter in the short-term rent committee that's still under consideration. We wanted to raise it now with the idea that we would probably try to implement it in time for next year's peak season. Mark, you had your hand up? Unmute Mark. Unmute Mark, please. Hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
With regard to David's comment about there being no action in regards to addressing the beach access for short-term rentals, it seems to me that the pull-off areas would be a definite solution, particularly in peak season along North Sea Pines Drive. And I know in specific at the gate committee, we did talk about the possibility of a pull-off area in the vicinity of the Monarch, which is not far from the entrance to the Sea Pines Beach Club. So it seems like to me, David, that would be something that we should perhaps move up on the priority list, because I think a convenient drop-off near the beach club entrance where people could drop folks off and at least their paraphernalia within a short walking distance or a short walking distance to the beach walks would be a way to really significantly address that issue. So I would think that we at the gate committee should perhaps move that up on the priority list. And to the extent that we're really going to move forward with some type of drop off along North Sea Pines Drive, it's probably going to be an integral part of at least the planning before we finish the North Sea Pines Drive construction project.
Right. Well, thank you very much for that. And that's certainly a good idea. And if we can, and we have talked about drop-offs, but it's one of those things where, you know, there's so much overlap among committees. It's really something that overlaps the safety, the gate committee, as you point out, and other committees. But it's something that in our peak months is desperately needed. And my only point was that we just haven't come up with any particularly good resolution for it.
Okay.
And Mark, I think to your point, it is worth, this is a matter that probably falls under short-term rental, gate, safety and security, and MEMV all. And so I think it's a good thing that we've started this discussion in the fall, so we can hopefully have a resolution early enough in the late enough in the winter to be able to do something if we're going to early enough in the spring so we have the peak season. Much like the Beach Ambassador program, if we wait until April to decide it, it's too late to cover. So it's an important issue.
Larry, I think perhaps at the next board workshop, we should have an open discussion on this and designate one of the 4 committees to take the lead in collaboration with perhaps representatives of the other 3, rather than continue to just sort of have 4 people standing on the sidelines wondering who else is working on it. So that would be a suggestion I would make.
Mark, I'm going to go one better and use the power of the chairman to figure that out, and I'll start assigning, and I'll do exactly what you suggested. Okay. Thank you for a very good suggestion, I might add. Steve, did we satisfy your concern on the Beach Ambassador program and what it's about and where we are?
Yeah, that's fine. We look forward to having some discussion. Just getting the package was the first time I heard anything about it, and then none of our team seemed to know much about it either. So we look forward to discussions.
Great. Thank you. And again, we're trying to take advantage of what we learned from the last peak season to be ready for the next one, because I presume the next one, particularly if COVID continues to be an issue, will again be a very busy one for us, with people driving from wherever they are trying to escape to be able to get some fresh air in a nice beach environment. Okay, our last committee report is strategic planning. Mr. Rodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think this is a 2-year process. As you may remember, we did a strategic plan under Michael Tucker's leadership in 2017. So this is building on that. There were 3 goals at that time. 2 of them were in the area of governance and finance, and Dave and Jim are obviously working those issues very hard. We ended up going through a SWOT analysis. I'm sure most of you have been through that over time. It's evolving, but I think it's interesting, the strengths and the weaknesses kind of came out where you'd expect. Certainly on the weaknesses side, we've got the infrastructure aging and failing issues. We got the revenue issues. And on the strength side, we have natural amenities and brand and history and so on. On the strengths and on the opportunities and threat side of it, there were really kind of 3 things that primarily emerged. One was in the area of marketing and branding, and Michael Tucker volunteered to lead that. So we've actually established a subcommittee to start to work on that. The issue is not to look at some kind of a national marketing campaign or anything like that, but there may be some things that we will want to do locally. Secondly, the town is looking at the same kind of issue, and many of the other POAs have similar issues. So we obviously want to be a part of that discussion. And it's also a useful exercise in identifying where we have deficiencies that need to be fixed. So that's underway under Michael's leadership. A second one has to do with our amenities. And when the strategic plan was done a couple of years ago, those were kind of set aside because we needed to solve our financial piece first. But I think it's time to come back and take a look at that. So I was glad to see that emerged as an activity. We're starting to get some volunteers that want to work on that as a subcommittee, and certainly any members of the board that want to join with that would be more than welcome. The third piece came out of the threats, and that had to do with the short-term rentals, which we've been talking about from a couple different angles just this morning. And I think that kind of falls in 2 categories. One is that if we look at the percentages across the community, we're coming up on where we approaching 40% as the short-term rentals, probably about 30% as the full-time residents, and maybe about 30% that are second homeowners that don't rent. So we're always going to have those 3 legs of the stool, and I think we have to figure out how we optimize each one of those and make them a welcome part of the community. It was also interesting as part of the discussion, and Scott Richardson brought this up, is that this may be a time to revisit the concept of whether we need to have some kind of a fee for short-term rentals. Clearly, there's costs being incurred in Toby's shop. There's other things that we're coming up on. There's certainly, we want to make sure we know who's doing it, because there may be some people flying under the radar at this point in time that are doing it. And there's certainly insurance impacts, as Scott mentioned, because if there's a difference in your insurance premiums based on whether you're owner occupied or somebody else is using your facility. So I actually think what was just talked about that Mark or somebody suggested as a couple of the representatives from a couple of the committees meeting together, this would be very timely to take up this. So it's emerging as a couple different areas. So that was all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Any questions for our governance, our strategic planning? If not, I would like to turn to unfinished business and the Revenue Task Force interim report. Before we start, I want to personally thank and have the community give great thanks to the members of the Special Revenue Task Force, Mr. Birdwell, Mr. King, Mr. Caskey, Mr. Ellis, and Mr. Borghese, supported by Mr. Bennett, our president, Victoria Shanahan, and Sandra Archer. I can only tell you that it was a relatively regular, time-consuming affair since May. We met on a consistent basis. We had numerous discussions, all constructive, all positive, not always agreeing with each other, but ultimately we were able to develop a consensus recommendation. And we owe a great deal of thanks to the amount of time that they put in to get to us to where we are. I will tell you that I would not let them stop. I pushed them very hard, and they responded favorably. So thank you to those gentlemen who served on this committee. With that, Sam, you want to give the report, start the report?
I will happily to give the report and start the conversation, Mr. Chairman. So as Larry mentioned, we've been doing regular meetings for the last.
Can you move the mic to Sam? I mean, the camera to Sam?
I'm sorry.
Hold on. How's this, Jim?
Thank you. Thank you. You know, camera work isn't my forte.
We got the chairman enjoys controlling the remote control. We'll just leave it there. But for 5 months, we've been working on this, and it really goes back to the referendum of last year that received overwhelming support, but did not pass the 75% threshold needed in the covenants to raise the assessment so that those resources could be put towards infrastructure projects and other things. And the challenge for the community and the task force became, how do we look to fund the critical infrastructure in the coming years? We have a lot to do. The community is very well aware of that. It fails every day, unfortunately. I appreciate the work and the commitment the board has made in allowing us to dip into the reserves to begin the other projects that we've got going on now, the ones that JR mentioned. They are critical, but they are just they're just the tip of the mountain. And when I say mountain, I mean that, because there's a lot to do out there. What we've done, what the committee has done, is we just sort of narrowed the focus of the projects. Let me start with that. Overwhelming support, 72% at the referendum. Again, didn't make the 75% threshold, but there was support in the community to raise resources to put into this community to fix the necessary infrastructure projects. We went through each of through 3 different scenarios, 3 different processes that we could potentially raise revenue. First was going back and looking at a referendum again. Was there a referendum that we could put together with all the parties that are involved in a referendum that we could all agree upon, that we thought had a reasonable chance of succeeding in today's environment? And quite honestly, we couldn't reach that point at this time that we thought we could put a referendum together that the committee would support at the 75% level. So we moved to fees. We have a big need in this community, and the thought was, can we raise fees? Can we impose fees on the community, on the visitors, on the guests, on the property owners in a way that's significant enough to fund the critical infrastructure? And when I use the word critical, I'm going to focus on that, the critical infrastructure of the community. And it became clear we just couldn't do it. There's not enough there is not enough ways that we can lay enough fees on folks to make an impact in the way we need to do it. So that really moved us to the last issue, the last opportunity we were looking at, which was creating a special tax district for the Sea Pines community that would be solely focused on infrastructure, repair and improvements within Sea Pines. When I say infrastructure, I'm really focused on roads, the drainage, the lagoons, the necessary repairs on the trails, on the beach walks, the critical infrastructure of the community, pulling out the gate, those things, not talking about those things, talking about the infrastructure, the things that move water, that move people, that move cars, that create the challenges we have, that create the safety issues we have, and they're failing on us. JR North Sea Pines Drive, as JR described earlier, is one of the original roads on Hilton Head, and it was designed to a standard that was fine for the day, but the day is come and gone. And that is the case all over our community, on our roads and our drainage, and it's failing. And so the concept that we're putting forth to the board is that we as a staff work with the appropriate council, put a special tax district in place that will be solely focused on funding critical infrastructure to make the improvements necessary to move Sea Pines community ahead. So, Mr. Chairman, that's a short and sweet report. I know there's a lot to talk about in that, and I'm happy for us to have those conversations.
So the Revenue Task Force is in fact recommending that we assist the community in creating a special tax district. And I want to emphasize that this is not, the CSA cannot do this. We need the registered voters, who are folks who are registered to vote in South Carolina and from their property in Sea Pines, to start the process through a petition to the county council and then to actually vote it. And the way it'll work is once the details are finalized, we will work with our council to create a petition, and it will be circulated to residents within Sea Pines. And if we can get 15% of the residents who are registered to vote in Sea Pines to sign the petition, it will be submitted to the county council and the Beaufort County Election Commission for certification approval. At that point, they will determine a date for a special election, and assuming a simple majority of those who vote in that election approve the special tax district, the county council will then adopt an ordinance which has all the details that were in the petition. In terms of where it will apply, our intent is that it will apply to all land in Sea Pines, whether that land is owned by commercial, resort, or residential properties. Who's registered? Who will be eligible to sign the petition and vote? If you are a registered voter at your property in Sea Pines, you will be able to sign the petition if you'd like, and will be able to vote. Our goal is to get this entire process started if the board approves it today. We have some details, obviously, will be worked out with council and others, and we're going to talk about some details that the Revenue Task Force still needs the board's total guidance on. If we can get that started, it takes time to go to the county. So our goal is to get the special election early enough in 2021 so that the first amount of taxes would be paid in sometime on your January 2022 tax bill. And the way the money will come to us is you'll pay your tax bill just like you do to all other property taxes in the county. That money will then be collected by the Beaufort County Treasurer for the benefit of the Sea Pines Special Tax District. Upon collection, that money will, at regular intervals, be transferred to a custodial bank account held in the name of the Sea Pines Special Tax District, and the use of those funds would be administered by a separate 5-person governing board, which we expect and anticipate in the petition will be based on the names, not the names of people, but rather the identity of officers of Sea Pines. So it will be your chairman, your vice chairman, your secretary, your treasurer, and your president, as those people, those offices may be filled by different people, but the county won't have to rename people each time. And for example, if I'm no longer chairman, I won't be on that board, it'll be your new chairman. So the executive committee, essentially it's the officers and the president, including the president, will be managing these monies. And then those boards will then There'll be a nominal administration fee, and that board will then contract with CSA to do all of the maintenance, repair, and reconstruction of the infrastructure. Now, there are some questions that we need to decide as the board, assuming we're going to agree, the board agrees that we will do a special tax district, in terms of what the specific terms are. The board, the tax district has to, the petition has to set a maximum, Dave Borghese, a maximum annual amount that can be collected. Is that correct? And it can be done through millage or dollars. Based on staff's current analysis, we believe that number should be between $3 and $4 million. I think to give ourselves the room, recognizing that it's hard to estimate over the next several years what actual costs would be. I think our recommendation should be that it be closer to 4 million, either 3.5 million or 4 million as the maximum. But each year the board will be able to set what the actual budgeted requirements are, so that the maximum isn't necessarily the amount that will be collected at any given time. That's one question we need to discuss. The second question, which is very important, is whether the tax district goes on forever, or whether, not unlike the referendum we had the last time, there's a sunset to it. Now, what the actual sunset is will obviously be based on what the maximum amount we take each year in terms of what we need. I think, Sam, you've estimated between,
I would say between $30 and $35 million, Larry.
Is the total project over the next 7 to 8 years, depending on how long it takes. So we will want to have a sunset, but there is some, the task force did not decide whether a sunset was necessary. And if it is, we need to figure out as we're putting this together, what that is. The task force has recommended that we collect taxes on an ad valorem basis. So your tax rate, your tax amount will be based on a millage rate that's set by this board, but it will be based on the taxable value of your property. So unlike the assessment that we currently assess under the covenants, where everyone pays the exact same number, the Revenue Task Force believes that the tax district should be based on ad valorem, so that the value of your property will determine how much of the tax you pay. In addition, because there is the taxable value will be different, will be based on whether you're a resident or non-resident. That may affect the amount of taxes you pay. But we need your consideration as to whether we're going to have ad valorem, because the other alternative would be to have a simple fixed fee, not dissimilar to what we have in our assessments. Lastly, and this is an important one, the question as to how the money is spent is significant. Our goal will be to spend it on critical infrastructure. But one part of our current critical infrastructure in the referendum was the gallery of shops. The Revenue Task Force has recommended that we specifically prohibit the use of these funds for the redevelopment of the gallery of shops. And that's a decision the board has to make today. So with that, I'd like to open to the board. Raise your hand. Are you comfortable starting the process for a tax district? And how do you feel on some of the questions that I've just raised? Barry? Unmute, please.
Yeah, I have. Thank you. I think the first thing I'd like to do is thank the Revenue Task Force. I know how hard you've worked, and we've certainly worked through a number of these issues in workshops. I'm really disappointed that we aren't really able to go the referendum route. As difficult as it was, you know, and as close as we got with the last referendum, I was really hoping that we could pull the community back together again, especially the three parties that were involved, you know, to be able to take a run at another referendum. I don't have a problem with the infrastructure tax district on a secondary issue. But again, I just want to go on record as saying that I'm really disappointed about that. I guess one other question that I have that's more of a logistical question, but in terms of defining the scope of the tax district, is it include Greenwood all the way up to the circle, in addition to the homes and commercial businesses within Sea Pines?
Barry, let me first respond to the first point on the referendum. I think the Revenue Task Force would have loved to have found a proposal for a referendum that we had confidence could pass. There's no doubt that there is some scar tissue from the fact that we put in as much effort as we did to get over 80% of the people voting and still couldn't get to 72%. And we heard from a number of homeowners of a variety of ideas that they thought would pass. Unfortunately, almost all of those required concessions, not only from RPOs, but from commercial and resort. And as we know, in any business negotiation, it's very easy to say what the other side should pay. It's harder to necessarily agree on what you should pay to offset that in return for the concession. So I want to assure the community, and I want to assure more importantly the board, that the task force worked very hard to see if we could find a proposed referendum that had a reasonable chance of success. We couldn't. And truthfully, to put a proposal that was likely to take time and money and cost, and then come up with another failure, and then have to start through the process of the tax district, would have put off the ability to collect the revenues until 2023 or later. And that just was not, in our mind, in the task force's mind, was not acceptable. And if the board feels otherwise, we'll certainly pursue another approach, but we need to get moving quickly and get the money. And so we simply could not find that process. The second question, I'll ask Dave Borghese how he's thinking of the design of the task force.
Sure. In order to get a position, you have to develop boundaries of what your district will be. Now, for the most part, you could say anybody who receives a annual assessment, they will be included in the boundaries. The real question that you have is, is there a potential and should we consider whether to include within our boundaries some of those properties that go from the Greenwood Gate to Sea Pine Circle along Greenwood Drive? I personally think that we have an opportunity to include some of those properties, particularly those properties that have their main ingress and egress off of Greenwood Drive. For those properties, pay nothing to maintain Greenwood Drive and the landscape and what would be the infrastructure. And I believe that there is it'd be reasonable to include those particular properties within the boundaries. But that's something that we're going to have to work through.
Thank you. Other questions? Bill Johnson.
Well, I concur with Barry, a lot of what he said. And I'd rather stick pins in my eyes than vote for a special tax district. However, I think that our last referendum of 72% was a directive to this board to come up with the financial ability to protect our investments. And I agree with the committee that you can't get 75% of the people to agree the sky's blue. So I don't see any other option.
Thank you, Bill. Bob Sowers, I think you had your hand up. Bobby, can you unmute?
Bob, you need to unmute.
Can you unmute? There you go. Bob?
I'm muted by the host. Is that you?
Yeah, you got it. Perfect.
I would just say I agree with the previous comments Barry made, especially about disappointment that we can't pull off a referendum. It's unthinkable, I think. And I'm disgusted by the people I talked to when that thing was over that didn't vote. So I know the opportunity's there. I also recall when this issue was brought up before one of our prior monthly meetings, the rise we got out of the floor of people claimed they'd sue if we went this way. And these are individuals who have the opportunity. So I think there's got to be a way to make one more shot at this thing. And so I'll leave it there for the moment. But there are ideas I have. Some probably aren't that good, but there's got to be a way to stir the mud enough to get 75%. The 3 or 4% I talk to, you know, they just plain lazy. And we got to get a way to disturb them, and I think there are ways to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob. David Pardue?
Yes, I think it's fair to say that in our prior discussions, I don't know of a single board member that would have preferred to go this route if as you say, if there were a good chance that a referendum would have passed. But in talking to people myself, particularly a lot of the people who were in opposition to the referendum, a lot of it was that they weren't willing to vote for a referendum that would raise anywhere near enough money that we need. The people who were saying that we don't have these needs and that it's only a 3 or 4 year problem, they didn't read the same stormwater report that I read. And so at this point, I'm very much in favor of continuing on studying the special tax district and see if we can pull it off. I haven't personally talked to the lawyers that have been advising us, but I'm assuming that the committee and that you, Larry, and that the staff has researched the legalities of this. And as long as it's a proper thing to do and it's supported by law, then I'm very much in favor of continuing. I personally would like to see no sunset, because I think that we're going to forever have these infrastructure problems. As soon as we finish the known issues today, there are going to be other issues that we're going to have 10 or 15 years from now. But if it needs to have a sunset, then so be it. But my preference would be, if legally we could do it without a sunset, that would be my preference.
Dave Ellis, I saw your hand up.
Yes. First thing I want to do, and I guess that's because of the old lawyer in me, we didn't do much of anything on this without obtaining legal advice from a firm that's a specialist or deals with this type of area of the law regularly. And the format which he is doing, and you know, we've talked about people filing lawsuits and so forth, it's done regularly enough throughout the state that, as he said, if we follow the mechanism of the state law, the routine, the regular way it's done, he used the words that if there's a lawsuit, this is Teflon, that, you know, it's just not going to be an issue, but, you know, that we follow precisely the routine set forth in the state statute. So all of this, and I think everybody feels that, you know, we're left with this alternative. So it's one of the things which is, what can you do? And it's come down to, this is what we can do. And I think, at least speaking for me, it is imperative that we do something, even though we know it's not going to be desirable, the most desirable way to do it. If it's what we are left with, then at least in my point of view, is that we need to do what we can before this community's infrastructure fails so badly and we get a deterioration in values of property. So no, you know, I personally wouldn't want this. You know, I'd want somebody to wave that magic wand and put together a referendum that would pass and everybody be happy with. And rather we have some other method, but unfortunately, you know, we're down to, this is what we can do. And that's after 5 months of meeting and interacting with the different groups that are involved. So we're not at the stage, I think, that we answer all of those questions that need to be answered. I think the direction is to see if the board is interested in pursuing this as a method. So then all of these details that have been raised, Larry had mentioned, that needs to be decided. Of course, could be decided today, but you may want more information and have the committee come back with you with the rest of the information. I mean, I personally have certain views, but those are not necessarily, you know, something that, you know, we needed, or we wanted to explore, because if this board said, we're not interested, forget it, well, then we spend a lot more time with the lawyer and a lot more money, and that we need to go ahead and make first the decision, is this the method that we're going to proceed on? And then we have to decide how quickly we can decide the unresolved things, such as the, you know, the amount of money that we need, or the amount of millage that we're going to need, you know, just the various things that Larry has mentioned to you. So I think that the nature of this is the selection of the process. And then, you know, there are a lot of people listening to this, and they're going to have viewpoints and opinions and comments that may come up with something, but it is a real issue. We know, you know, the issues. I mean, we know that, you know, it's, the law requires that the vote is by the electors, and that's going to, you know, cause some concern, you know, that that means there's a large group of owners that don't have a vote. I mean, we go through all of this, and, you know, we're left with what the statute allows us to do. And so, you know, to some extent, our hands are tied. So we're going to have to make a decision. In my mind, and where I am, is that if there is no other way, we either stop talking about money and let the community just decline, or we get, you know, off and do something that's not necessarily makes us all happy, but that we can come together and say, we need the money more importantly than, you know, and needing some other things, because we can keep wishing for that fairy godmother to come and wave that wand and make everybody happy. It's just not going to happen. I'm sorry to pontificate, excuse me.
Thank you, David. Karen, Corbett, you have your hand up, and then Steve, and then Jim.
Okay, I just wanted to make a couple of comments as well, and I support what David Pardue and Dave Ellison both said, and it's a shame that we can't get a referendum passed, but I'm totally convinced that we can. I sat on the phone campaign group and listened to people that voted against it, and there was no basis of their voting against it that had any bearing on what was included in the referendum. And the special tax district, I think we heard from 72% of our homeowners that they wanted us to pursue, and this is the way to do that. So the ones that don't get to vote, I think they've already voiced their opinion that they support this in a large majority. And I just go on record to saying that I think this is our only alternative.
Thank you, Karen. Steve?
Yes, I just wanted to add a couple of comments. I mean, I think that everyone, including me, would have liked to have had a referendum, but we couldn't get terms that we thought would pass. And so I think the special tax district is our best alternative. And you know, I think the ad valorem basis is the most fair. That will be a basis that will, the resort will likely be the largest payer of the tax, of the new tax district, or the new tax, but we understand that, and I think it's the most fair basis. And you know, well, I think we need to get on to determining how much money is needed to be raised, and I do think that a sunset on the tax is going to be needed in order for voters to vote in favor of the tax district.
Jim, Cassidy, thank you, Steve. Jim?
Yeah, thank you. Having served on the task force, and it was exhaustive, but very informative. I think what Bill Johnson said hit it on the head about a referendum, that we all wanted it. But with this 75% threshold that we have, and the expectations and the viewpoints that someone feels something, therefore they think it's right, somebody wants something the way it is, but contractually it can't be done. All of those barriers accumulate to allow us to only get to that 72%. And to come up with terms and circumstances across the three parties, across this community to pass a referendum. it was a really difficult decision to say, we don't think we should spend the time, effort, and resources to try to chase that one when we have something that can be implemented if we follow the statute, as Dave Ellis said. And I can admit to the board that as I was sitting at that table, I was one to say, whoa, no government involved in my business, not in my community. This is a private community. We own the roads. We own this problem. We have to solve this. But once I was educated, not only through the work of the task force, but this expert legal counsel that we retained, that is specialty in this law, that demonstrated to us how little the government is involved, how enabling this legislation is for this kind of a problem, that it's one time in government that, wow, there is a solution for the people to do something on their behalf for their benefit and in a manner that is pretty fair. And I echo Steve's comment about ad valorem. I think what that does is it equals the playing field, that we're all treated the same. So there's no, oh, commercial should do this, resort should do this, homeowners should do that. Oh, that's taken away because we're all going to do it. So it was a really tough decision to come with the task force to recommend to the board. And I really encourage my fellow board members to embrace this journey that we're on and see what we can get done here. Did I lose you?
No, Stu, I lost you. I was on mute. I meant Stu. Thank you, Jim. Stu.
Yeah, a couple comments, Mr. Chairman. I think we're on the right track. I think the ad valorem is the right way to go, but also for another reason. And in talking to the county auditor who has to, handle this, the ad valorem is much easier to do. The doing it as a uniform fee is very problematic. You get into reprogramming 100,000 tax bills. And so there'll certainly be some pushback, I think, if we try to do something other than the ad valorem. So I'm glad to see that people think it makes sense for other reasons. Secondly, on the sunset, I don't believe that county council would approve something that didn't have a sunset. And in fact, typically what you have is a mechanism that the people that voted in can vote it back out again if they lose interest in it. And so clearly, if at some point in the future we can come up with a referendum, certainly a part of that can be the retirement of the tax district. So I think we're on the right track.
Thank you, Stu. Scott?
Yeah, Larry, I just want to make a couple of points like everybody. I think, those that are listening and understand, I think everybody's made the point. We do not have a choice. We have to come up with some revenue mechanism within the next 18 months. So because of all the reasons that have already been said, I'm going to support, going down this road. But I do want to make a huge plea that we do not stop trying to come up with a referendum. Because the world changes, as we have seen in spades this year. Things happen and the world turns upside down real fast. And there may be an answer out there for us to find a referendum that could pass. And I don't want us to just walk away and say, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. This tax district is it. Because as far as I'm concerned, the tax district is number 3. One short thing, I think there is a way to raise, as y'all know, I've worked on the fee thing. I think there are fee possibilities that could work, but primarily a referendum is number 1. And I just don't think we should give up on that. That doesn't mean we should stop what we've got to do with this tax district, because some people may not know it takes a while to do this. And we cannot wait for a year and a half to start working on this. We need to vote it. Have it out there, get it in place in case we need to use it. But anyway, as I said, let's don't quit trying to work on a referendum while we're doing this. Because if we do find the golden bullet for it and feel like we can do it, I think that's the way to go. Thank you.
And Scott, let me just note, if in fact we can find a referendum source that would provide as much revenue, the county has the ability to abolish the tax district at our request at any time.
Right.
If we didn't need the tax revenue as well. It may well be that at some point a referendum raises additional revenue needed to cover increases in our security force, for example, given where we are with the additional short-term rental question. So the answer to your point is, at least as long as I am chairman, I will continue to work with the parties to try and find a referendum. But I want to again emphasize, and Jim said it, and I tried to mention it to Barry, we heard from a lot of homeowners, property owners, as to what they would vote for, even though they voted against the last time. And they asked us to simply add X, Y, or Z. But invariably, X, Y, or Z meant someone else coming up with more than was in the referendum, or are we coming up with less? And that's easy to say, and we certainly pushed it. I want to make sure the community understands. You left no stone unturned. But at some point in a business negotiation, and many of us spent our careers involved in business negotiations, you can't make a deal that one side feels is unfair or is unwilling to give up value. And that's kind of where we were. Both sides offered the other an opportunity to do something that we didn't think, all three sides, that we didn't think, in our case, we didn't think would pass if we went forward. They didn't think they were willing to give. So and Scott, we will continue to look at those things. And there may.
I'm not criticizing. I don't want you to take this as a criticism.
I want to emphasize, as things change and circumstances change, maybe the other sides of the fence or the RPOs will have different perspectives. Anyone else who has not, Don, you haven't commented?
Great. Don,
go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with what Scott's saying and everyone else is saying. I'm very, very disappointed that we cannot get the referendum passed. I support the special tax district. We should go forward with it. We need the money. Infrastructure has fallen apart. For good or bad, I think the commercial is will pay a large portion of it. For me personally, as a very small business in here, I'll pay probably a disproportionate amount compared to others. I'm willing to do that. I want to make everything work. I would like to keep pursuing the referendum, and I'd like to keep pursuing the transfer fee. Palmetto Dunes, other properties have had the transfer fee. It works great. They have a lot of improvements up there that we do not have. So I support the special tax district, but I'd like to keep going for referendum and really, really work on the transfer fee.
Jim Cassidy?
If you recall during my report from the governance committee, we've had a task force as part of governance on this referendum question that Alex Cruden chaired and has done really innovative work about developing an approach that we start doing referendums that are the either or referendums, that we start to learn how to come together as a community to change practices, change rules, change regulations. So that might be a road that this board wants to consider thinking about, is how we could maybe set up a roadmap of some smaller referendum kind of issues that can get 75% and begin to learn how to educate, how to communicate, and how to get positive vote. But that 75%, like you said, those of us who negotiated in business, anytime you have a supermajority at that level, it's virtually impossible to get anything done. And I think we're proving that.
David Ellis? Unmute, David.
I want to first thank Larry, you, for having this open discussion and allowing it, because this is part of what I think is absolutely necessary for the members of our community to see the discussion and to see that we don't make decisions behind closed doors. We have differences of opinion. We express those, and they're and you need to see that. And I think this is a very appropriate place for that. But the second thing is, would it be time to put the motion for the resolution on the floor now and get a second so we can continue discussion, so we have that everybody knows what we're at, a method of proceeding?
Absolutely. I'm happy to do it. Before, David, why don't you go ahead and do that, and then we can still continue around the horn.
Okay. You want me to move it then?
Sure, please.
Okay. I move that Community Services Associates, Inc. Board of Directors, on the recommendation of the Revenue Task Force, authorizes the CSA's president, working with outside legal counsel, to initiate the steps needed to establish a Sea Special Tax District covering at least all of the land in Sea Pines.
I second it. David Borghese has seconded. Thank you, David. We now have a specific resolution on the floor. I'll continue to take comments on the general question, and then I do have some questions on specific terms. Any more, Stu Rodman?
Yeah, just two comments. One, I think it does seem that after we get beyond this, this may be a trigger to help us come back to the community and to say the 75 doesn't work. Why don't we change the covenants to the 2/3, the 67? This might be the impetus to get us to that point. So just something to think about, because I think we all agree we need to do that at some point. The other comment I would make, just because some people in the community may be concerned about the overreaching arm of government, the county council's role is purely limited to the enabling ordinance that puts this in place. Secondly, the county administration itself has absolutely nothing to do with it. Doesn't touch the money, doesn't touch anything. And it's basically the treasurer is the one, as Larry mentioned, that will handle everything. And if you look at the treasurer, it's really the largest bank in the county. It's the depository for federal and state funds. It was probably $100 million of Sea Pines funds that flows through it, going to the school district and the town and every place else. So I don't know that we need to be overly concerned, and I'm sure our PR folks will explain that. But I don't think there's any government overreach in this particular thing.
Thank you, Sue. And Dave Borghese, if you don't mind, you've had a lot of conversations regarding this. Maybe you can give the community some additional, and the board some additional understanding of the way it works.
Well, I've spent a lot of time doing the research on this and speaking with council, and I have a bevy of information that really helped us put this in perspective. And I think the big thing is understanding that the funds, that the county administration is nothing more than a billing and collection agency, and they take the taxes that they collect and then disperse it to the operations of the various governmental agencies and entities. So the Sea Pines tax district would be another like quasi-governmental agency, and we would have to do the same thing that everybody else does, such as the town of Hilton Head, who receives money from the treasury, or the county school district, or even the county itself for operation of its public works. So it's really clear that it's a method in which the people who live in a particular area can get the benefits of taxes to do what they need to do without interference from other governmental agencies and organizations. So I think this is really well contained. I think it's clearly for the benefit and will be used for the benefit. And there will be a great transparency, the same kind of transparency that there is, if you will, for the receipts and expenditures from the town of Hilton Head. I mean, they have to go through the reporting, and this district would have to do the same thing. So it'd be very transparent. And in fact, by law, the uses of the funds will be dictated by the specifics of the petition. And whoever's on that board for the special tax districts, you're going to be held accountable to make sure that those funds are spent specifically for what is in the petition and what is named as the appropriate itemized expenditures. So I think this is really a very good way to go. And I think it should give all of the property owners within Sea Pines comfort as to how these monies are going to be used.
I'd like to at least ask for some thoughts and comments about three questions. One is, we do have a choice of having a single fee across everyone, including everyone who owns property, which would mean the resort and all commercial paying the same, for discussion, $500 to $600 a year. The Revenue Task Force felt that was not in fact fair, and that the fairer approach is the ad valorem. This does mean that folks who have homes that are less valuable in the tax records will pay less, probably less than they would under the referendum, but those at the higher end will pay more. It does spread the wealth a little bit, what we call more fairly, since this is the way that virtually every other public works and roads anywhere else you live and public properties would be handled. So given that the covenants were designed back in 1970, in the 70s, when homes were all basically at the same value, the landscape has obviously changed. And in addition to the 75% problem, there is the concern that having everyone pay the same amount of money no longer really works. So the Revenue Task Force has recommended that we use ad valorem. Can I get a sense of how the board feels about that? Stu?
Yeah, I'm in favor of that. You want it as a motion, or do you just want to get a straw poll?
I just want to get it. This will be, so we understand it.
Sure. I'm in favor of it. Yeah, I'm in favor.
Mark, is that your hand up?
Yeah, yes. I think the foremost reason is the Revenue Task Force did feel like the ad valorem is the fairest way to go. But the secondary reason is that Stu has made the point from the county's standpoint that it would be very, very problematic to go with a fixed fee calculation because of the complexity of calculating the taxes each year on a timely basis. And downstream from that, it would probably impose some real administrative issues and complex calculations from our own administration of property transfer. So I think that as a secondary reason, there is a question as to whether the county would go along with doing it on a fixed fee basis.
That's a good point. Thank you. JR?
I was wondering I think it'd be important for us in this process to let people know what the bottom and the top might be and what the range between the lowest and the highest, because I think that'll help us calm the conversation down somewhat.
I'd be
happy. A guy that owns a $300,000 house versus a $8 million house, and what's going to be the variance of the fee?
I'm going to let Mr. Borghese, who's looked into some of this for us.
We've tried looking into this, and we are setting up, while we try to determine and specify what the boundaries are, to also then gather what the aggregate taxable value is. Once you have the aggregate taxable value, you can figure out what the millage rate needs to be in order to achieve the $3 or $4 million you want annually. Once you get the millage rate, everybody can then calculate your own tax depending on the tax value that is in your current annual property tax bill. So the answer is, I can't tell you exactly what it is today, but we will be able to get a pretty good understanding of what that will be in the future.
Well, I don't think you have to tell us exactly what it is, but I think in the scheme of getting people to approve of this thought process, they're going to want to know approximately what the range is of what they and their neighbors are paying.
I totally agree with that. And all I'm saying is this is very early in the process, and we need to do the work in order to get the information to be able to provide that information to all property owners.
And we are doing that work, and we will continue to. We all get a tax bill, and it shows what our taxable value is. And the taxable value is different depending on whether you're a resident or not. The taxable value is based on your exemptions and whether you're a resident or not. But you can take a millage rate, and Mr. Borghese, if you're not too uncomfortable, if you took a millage rate of 01 or 02, which would be 10 or 20, those we think are the absolute ranges of what is likely to be needed. And so you can look at your tax bill and apply a millage rate of 01 or 0.010, or which is 10, I guess, in the way the bills are, or 20, and that will give you some idea of what's the more likely case or the worst case. But again, that's just for purposes of quick analysis. We hope to be able to do a much better job within a month or so. More information. Mr. Ellis?
one of the things that Dave Borghese spoke of, what we have to do to gather that information and to be able to do it exactly. But that information will be available by the time the petition is there to be signed and voted on, so that everybody can figure that. It has to, so we'll have that. Right. But that requires a substantial amount of work and cost to get all of that data and to work it out, including, exactly what's in the district, et cetera. So before we got to that point, we felt that we needed to know that this was an avenue that people wanted to take. And one more reason, when we talked about the method of doing ad valorem, the property owners, such as most of us here, the residential property owners, need to understand that this is, if we went to a uniform fee, the commercial and the resort would pay very little. They would pay a lot fee just like we do. And that's not much. Doing ad valorem, as Steve Birdwell said, they're going to be a very large payer of the ad valorem tax. So it brings everybody in the mix in a more fair basis. From that standpoint, all of the components of the community. And so that's another reason that at least the residential property owners need to appreciate for doing this, is that the commercial and the resort are going to be sharing a good part of this tax.
Thank you, David. Scott?
I have a question about the ad valorem. I've tried to find it reading and I can't. And I'm thinking of, versus a set fee versus the ad valorem. And I hear you with ad valorem, but is it possible, because the county keeps both lot and home value when they do your taxes and all that, could you do the ad valorem based on lot values instead of home values?
We've been advised no, that trying to split it in any kind of way would likely run into significant problems, not only administratively, but with the council as well.
Did you ask that specific question? Because I know we asked them a question about coming up with our own split, but I mean on something that the county already has, which is the lot values. I'm just trying to get to, possibly a place where if you take the lot values, you're probably in Sea Pines, maybe $300,000 or $400,000 at the lowest and, a couple of million at the highest. But if you do the house values, it's going to be a lot wider than that. It's going to be 8 or 10 times, maybe more than that. That's why I'm asking. I'm just saying, is that a possibility?
Address that?
Yeah.
We asked the lawyer specifically, Scott, about how to follow this and to do it. And there are several questions that you have to be addressed that from the possible challenges. And one is the equality, when you have a difference of going from one of the regular methods and whether you're treating classes equal. And so his recommendation throughout the thing was that, one, the county, you got a uniform fee. The county doesn't really want to do that, the best information we have. But the ad valorem tax is set up, which is on the county's rolls, and it's everything, unfortunately. And if you do it that way, you are, as I said the word before he used, you're Teflon on any challenge. You followed exactly the normal method. Once you start deviating from the normal method, you then may subject yourself to a challenge that could be successful. And everything we've done is for nothing. So that's the reason we've come to this.
Yeah, I'd like to support, I think, just what Dave said. From my vantage point, at least from what I've heard, if we have to be doing a tax district, we need to do it like they're doing all over the state right now. This is really an infrastructure program. It's confined to that. It's very much like a utility district or whatever. And if it's being done that way statewide and the counties have been administering it, I think we need to stay as close to the norm as possible. Go the ad valorem route, and don't put any kind of barriers, or difficulties into getting this done.
Thank you, Barry. I want to move on to the next subject that I'd like to make sure we're all thinking about, and that is the question of a sunset. There clearly the referendum had a sunset. On the other hand, we know that our needs are not going to end at any particular time. Stu has recognized that there's a benefit to having a sunset, as the county will feel more comfortable that way. What's folks' feelings about whether we sunset it? Assuming that we'll have to figure out the specifics once we know how much we want to raise and roughly what our values are. Thoughts on a sunset, Mr. Borghese?
I believe a sunset is a reasonable thing to do, and understand that our needs are never going to come to an end. Okay, we understand that. But let me give you some of the reasons why I believe a sunset makes some sense, even beyond the issue of acceptance by county council. My view is if you get out 7 and maybe as far out as 10 years, you really don't know what's going to be needed at that point in time, or what the cost levels are going to be. But you also have another generation of property owners that should be weighing in on their evaluation at that point in time. All of us on this board will probably, or maybe not all of us, but most of the residential Class A board members will probably be replaced by younger people at some point in time. And they should be in a position to make those evaluations, rather than us trying to make those evaluations for somebody, for things that we can't even imagine that far down the road. So I believe a sunset is a rational thing to do. And it provides, and I think it also provides all of the property owners with some comfort in the fact that yes, there'll be other issues that'll need to be resolved by other people at a point in time that it would be appropriate to do that. So that's my basic a sense of this thing. And I get that future boards can adjust a millage rate or whatever, so long as it doesn't exceed a maximum. But the other comment is we are really fixing things that are maybe 50 and 60 years old. And so the real question is are we going to need an extra $4 or $5 or $6 million a year in addition to our homeowner assessment when we fix something that has a very long life? So I'm willing to say, hey, let's let another generation of property owners make that evaluation at a reasonable point down the road.
Others? Dave Pardue? Unmute, please. Unmute.
I'm sorry. I've already expressed my personal opinion in that I would prefer not to have a sunset. But can I ask, if we have a sunset, let's say for the sake of this discussion that it's 8 years, 9 years, whatever. Okay, so 8 years goes by, and let's say that there was enough community support to continue it. You don't have to spend the $3 or $4 million a year. It can be 1 million or whatever. But what steps are there steps in place where we, at the time, a board or the community could make the decision to continue it that's easier than going through what we're going to be going through over the next year and a half? Or do you have to go through the same process we're going through now?
I think Stu could answer that question as easy as anyone.
Yeah, I think if you raise an interesting point, we could certainly look at the enabling ordinance, and maybe there's a way that it says, you know, by a vote of 50%, it could be extended for 3 years or something like that without going through the whole process again. So it's a good point. I'll take a look at it.
And we'll ask our lawyers to look at it, David. Any other comments? Let me then raise the last issue that I think we definitely need to address today. Perhaps not surprisingly, there is continued concern about our ownership and development of the Galleria shops. I think that was a big issue in the referendum. It continues to be an issue in the people who are commenting. I have no doubt, and I continue to support the purchase at the time. While many people still don't understand, it is not a cash issue. It is just how you have your investments. So it's a different investment than a bond we're holding, but it's an asset. And if we sold it tomorrow, we'd simply be turning cash in our asset base that we might be able to get through something else. So I don't want to mislead the community into thinking that if we sold it tomorrow, we wouldn't need the money that we're raising. We still need that money. But there are people who believe that we shouldn't be spending the money on the redevelopment of the gallery shops. I think it's fair to say, and Sam, you can add your thought, that at this point in time, it probably is not as important for redevelopment as we thought it was when we bought it. It's still a strategic location and one that we want to keep, but we probably don't need to redevelop it. So the question for the board is, are we willing to expressly state to the community that the petition for the special tax district will expressly exclude the use of these funds for the redevelopment of the gallery of shops? Sam, thoughts?
I fully support that, Mr. Chairman. I think we will be looking at other ways to solve the problems that were raised with the purchase of the gallery shops outside of the as you mentioned, having the control of what happens on that site remains critical to our community. It's our front door. But in terms of making further investments or things necessary to facilitate gate access, short-term rentals, I think we're going to look in different directions to do that. And then we will continue to work with gate entry and the other committees to determine what needs to happen with that site long-term in terms of selling it or finding a developer to redevelop it in a way that's appropriate for it being the front door to CFIs. So I fully support not excluding that from this district.
Thoughts from others? JR.
How are you going to distinguish between developing it with these funds that you're talking about with the district or the existing funds you have? If you actually have a plan, I think we have to decide what the plan should be for this. I mean, it's been such a controversial issue. I personally like the idea because I think it's the entrance to sea pines is less than desirable. And of course, if somebody else had developed it, we would have many more issues. We can make it a pasture or we can do anything we want to, but I think we need to be clear about where we're going with that. Just not saying we're not going to use these funds for that, because if you don't do that, you're going to have the same stuff going on as it has been in the past 2 years.
And JR, and I don't disagree with that. And I don't want to make a proclamation in the sense coming from the president. I think that's where the committee, the gate entry committee, is working on making some final recommendations to the board about what to do with the gallery. Our goal in this is to make sure the community knows that we are not going to spend these funds or other capital funds on the gallery of shops right now. That's not the direction we're headed anymore.
Well, we may find ourselves in a position, though, to spend a little bit, to JR's point, a little bit of resources if we can figure out how we can raise it and keep it, quote, as a pasture for the time being, because it is.
Yeah, that was my next statement, Jim. I think that we're doing a disservice to the community by leaving it there. It's about to fall down. It's the entrance, so the main entrance of our community, and something needs to be done with that. And I understand the issue of the losing development rights, but I think we should be able to deal with the town in that regard and give us some extensions in that, because they'd love to see the building gone or redeveloped.
And Sam, I assume that your expectation is that taking it down is a nominal expense compared to redevelopment.
That's correct.
No question. There's no question of that.
Yeah, no doubt about that.
How do others feel? Personally, I'm happy, and Sam's comfortable saying we aren't going to use these funds. JR, I understand. We're not being disingenuous, because clearly someone would say, well, you just use something else. But the idea is to essentially be telling the community that the redevelopment is not currently in our plans. I'm sorry, Sam.
And can I remind you that?
Yeah.
Understand the gallery of shops is going to be a separate standalone conversation through the committee that's making the work on it, and ultimately to the board and the community. So we owe that to this board and the community to be very clear and transparent about where we're headed with this. And we're just not there yet, JR, but we will be.
I'll say that like Don Sigmund, you had your hand up. Unmute, please. Unmute, Don.
I didn't. Thank you, though.
Okay. Mark? Unmute.
Kerry and Dave.
Kerry, while Mark's waiting, oh, there he goes. Mark, you're
yeah, sorry about that. I, as part of the gate entry committee that's charged with taking a relook at the use of the gallery shops site, I think what we've all agreed is that the original scale of the redevelopment of that site, where we were going to relocate possibly the administrative or many of the administrative functions currently at CSA, clearly that's probably not in the cards at this point, but I'm not sure that the committee has come to the conclusion that that site would not be used for some opportunity to purchase daily gate fees and therefore eliminate the cash collection at the at the main gate, which is a real cause of the congestion at the gate. So while the scale has changed, as a member of the committee, I was not aware that we had come to the conclusion that it would not be developed in a scaled down version to perhaps enable some welcome center that's off of Greenwood to where people can buy various daily or weekly passes, to where that transaction is not taking place at the gate. And by the time the cars get there, they've got the pass and they're just simply waved through, rather than having this cash transaction that takes place at the gate. Am I missing something in that? And I guess
Mark.
I'll weigh in on that. What we're trying to achieve, and it's primarily in Sam's lap right now with regard to what the task force was trying to achieve right now, is to be able to tear down the Galleria shops and not lose the potential developmental rights in the future. We don't know what the future will be with regard to our need for gate operations or other services to be built on there. But right now, all we're trying to do is get the opportunity to remove the unsightly appearance of it and not lose our potential developmental rights. Right, Sam?
Y'all are on mute.
Y'all are on mute, Sam.
Well, just real quick, I agree with Mark. Based on the survey that we had, the highest priority was to clean up the gate, and this does work toward it. So I don't want to give up on that. But to agree with what Kerry's saying, the first objective is to clean up the site.
Yeah. No. I agree with that. But my point is, this is a big sore that's been festering for 2 years. And we as a group have the responsibility to determine what we're going to do with it and let the community know what or we need to sell it and get rid of it. And this is just my opinion, because it had a lot to do with the referendum. It might have cost us the referendum. Who knows whether it did or not. I think personally that it was a great idea to purchase it, because it took it out of the hands of a developer that was going to build a large building with a lot more traffic and that sort of thing. And the proposed ideas of and the complaints we've had about entry and exit, ingress and egress out of Sea Pine's main gate, it was one of our biggest problems. So I think we have to, as a group, come to some kind of conclusions what we're going to do, but we need to declare what we're going to do. And if it means that we're going to demolish the building and keep it for 5 years or 10 years and then decide what to do, that's fine. But we need to say what we're going to do.
We're way off target. We're way off focus.
Yep. Bill?
Yeah, as a chair of this task force, comment I'd like to make is that we want to maintain the maximum amount of value of this footprint as we possibly can. And we're working with the town, and Sam and David Henderson are working with the town to try to accomplish that objective, where we could tear down the facility and still maintain our development footprint as it is today. I thought after talking to John McCann and talking to Tom Lennox, this was going to be a fairly easy process. But what I've soon discovered is getting this through the town is kind of like kissing a gorilla. You know, it can be done, but it's usually on the gorilla's terms. And that's what we're trying to get done. Thank you.
I'm sure Tom appreciates that. I don't want to get too far along on discussing the gallery shops, because the question that's posed, and JR, I understand your concern that it isn't being disingenuous. It's simply saying these funds will not be used for that development. Now, what we do with it and whether we have other funds that we can find is for the future board. So can I at least get a sense of the folks' willingness to include in the petition that these funds will not be used for the redevelopment of the gallery? If you favor that, please raise your hand. Okay, and again, JR, your point is a good one, and we may have to be explaining at some point that as we've had this very favorable conversation, that we go with that. We have a resolution on the floor. It's fairly broad and it doesn't include a lot. We can make it more specific. Carrie, unmute.
My only question with the proposed resolution where it says all land in Sea Pines, will that also include the land from Greenwood, from the gate to the circle?
The resolution is drafted to say at least specifically, because we want to make sure that the staff knows we're not excluding any land, but we may include more as we draw the final boundaries.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Larry, on that same topic, there could be lands that CSA would want to exclude. For example, the properties that CSA owns. And I wonder if the resolution could be changed to be lands in Sea Pines to be defined.
Right.
Dave, we thought through that in great detail, and part of the issue is, we have a couple of schools, we have a PSD and some others, but if you go the ad valorem route, those are excluded already because they have no taxable value. CSA does have some taxable value, and I'll give you one, for instance, which is the Gallery of Shops. I would say that property should be included within our boundaries, even, and because it has its main entrance and exit off of Greenwood Drive. And the reason for that is that if the decision at some point in time later was to sell that piece of property, they would still be on the special tax district and they would be generating a tax for our use. So I do agree that my proposal would be to look at those properties on Greenwood Drive that we think we can include within the boundaries and have logical reasons to do that. It's clearly one of the things that we will be discussing with legal counsel, and to the extent that we need to discuss it within county council as to what our boundaries are, certainly we're going to go that route. But I think what Larry says is we are going to include everybody, and quite frankly, all we'll be doing is for CSA owned property is we're taxing ourselves and the money comes right back to us anyway.
And Steve, there's also a practicality to try and draw a map that excludes, think of all the various common areas where we're giving encroachments that excludes it, takes more effort than simply to include everything. If it turns out we end up having a tax bill that increases by some amount, we've taxed ourselves.
But we get it back.
We get it back and we'll account for that in the actual millage that we ultimately need. So it was as much a matter of practicality and trying to draw a map that has little circles everywhere that there's a piece of CSA property. Stu?
Yeah, a question for David. If we just call it taxable property, does that help solve the problem, David? Borghese?
I don't know why we would need to call it taxable property. I mean, okay. If there's no tax value, the millage rate would never apply to that property. So, okay. And think of this, if Montessori decides that they want to give up that property and sell it, I want that piece of property within the boundaries. So if something changes at a later point in time, and that can become part of the tax rolls, we should not be excluding things.
Larry, do we think the resolution's broad enough and has enough flexibility? Because, I mean, we can't solve this today because we haven't done all that homework.
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable that
you're just trying to get a green light. Let's get on with this.
Yeah, and I expect by the November board meeting, we will be announcing additional terms that are in the petition finalized, including it maybe even as far as the maximums and the term. But we do now have a sense of what we can start our lawyer going on, which is ad valorem. It will have a sunset. It will exclude the Galleria shops. We have other issues still to be addressed, and we will continue addressing them so that by the next board meeting, we will have even more certainty. Mark, unmute, please. Unmute.
I would think that Steve's suggestion of just saying as defined by the board gives us the ultimate flexibility to incorporate the lands outside of what most reasonable people would see as sea pines. So I would think we would want to amend the resolution with those 3 words. Realizing we've got a lot of details to work out, but I think that at least documents the intent that we may in fact include those corridor properties owned by third parties that are actually outside of sea pines.
Okay, how would you amend it, Steve or Mark?
Let me defer back to Steve because he was referencing the language.
It currently reads covering at least all of the land in sea pines.
And I think Steve's recommendation was as defined by the board.
Steve,
that's correct. Yeah, I think so. I think that you just read it, Larry says all lands and sea pines, and I was just thinking it should be lands and sea pines to be defined.
Dave Ellis, are you okay with that?
Yeah, that's a little vague. I think people would want to know what we're going to include because they think if we say as defined, they may think we're going to take certain people out and not include them and not be worried about that. So,
Steve, if you're trying to get lands outside, perhaps we should say, and any other lands to be determined by the board.
I think that would be a good addition.
Isn't this going to have to come back to another vote specifically?
Yes.
That's where you do it.
That's the key to it anyway. This is the directional motion to get started on it, and then we have to come back with all of that. And you know, we could. I don't know. We have to decide that just today. I think we get on the direction.
I agree with Dave Ellis. I think we're trying to split hairs where we don't need to split hairs until we actually figure out the exact thing that we're going to vote on later.
Well, but Dave Ellis, are you okay if we add and any other lands as determined by the board?
I don't have a problem with it. I just want to get us to agree on something.
Right. Okay. Steve Birdwell, is that okay with? Are you okay with that?
That's fine. That's good.
Okay. Barry.
Yeah. Could we, before we do anything here, could we read the resolution one more time, not only for us, but also for the audience?
I will read it out. Resolved, Community Service Associates, Inc. Board of Directors, on the recommendation of the Revenue Task Force, authorizes CSA's president, working with outside legal counsel, to initiate the steps needed to establish a Sea Pines special tax district covering at least all of the land in Sea Pines and any other land as determined by the board.
Thank you.
Since there was an amendment, whoever seconded the motion should accept the amendment as I did.
Mr. Borghese.
So accepted.
Any further discussion? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor, raise your hands, please. Any opposed? Seeing none, that resolution passes. Thank you for that discussion. I hope it was valuable. And again, I would simply ask those listening today, those who may listen to our meeting later, to remember that I ask them simply to listen to what was said, to study the information that we provide, ask questions if you have questions, raise comments or concerns if you have them, at comments@csacpines.com. We will address the questions. We will listen to your concerns and act appropriately where we believe they are valid. But please take the time to study this issue before you make a decision whether you like it or not. We won't please everyone, I am sure, but I think some of the concerns that have been raised in terms of non-residents not voting this time versus the amount of support we had last time about the ad valorem and how it affects you, I think we can answer a lot of those concerns. And if you take the time to study it, I hope we will have the support of the community to raise the revenue that we all believe is necessary to improve and maintain our community. So with that,
Larry, my iPad hiccuped a little. That was a unanimous vote, right?
Yes, it was unanimous. Yes. Okay, I want to quickly move through the new business. The announcement, the date of record for the CSA Board of Directors election is October 1. If you are a property owner resident property owner on that date, you will be able to vote on that date. Thereafter, the election ballots will go out on November 1, due back on December 1. We have a motion to approve the Architectural Review Board members. We are adding Susan Johnson as a three-year term member, and we are adding Sandra. Who's the alternate?
I am muted. We're muted.
Yes.
You're adding Dan.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Dan Fuller, right?
Yes.
Right.
Dan Fuller as the alternate, replacing Susan Johnson. The motion is in the packet. Can I get is there any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye. No.
Thank you. I
recuse myself.
Thank you, Bill. I'm sorry. Thank you. We have a meeting schedule that is in your packet. It is obviously what we have today. A new chairman, if there is a new chairman, may want to change it based on his schedule, or committee chairs may. But at least for now, I'd like a motion to Resolution 12C. Is there any discussion on the meeting schedule? Seeing none, all in favor, raise your hands, please, to approve it. It's approved. Next, the committee charter for the Land Use Management Committee. We never actually got around to approving that charter. There are no changes from the last one. Can I get a motion? Is there any discussion on Resolution 12D? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposition? That passes. We have an inclusion of Greg Thomas as a member of the Strategic Planning Committee. A motion's been made to include him. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. That passes. 12F. Jim, you spoke briefly about this. The Governance Committee would like to normalize our committee membership structure to be similar to what we have on the board. Very quickly, Jim, you want to discuss it?
Just as I reported, we would change it to 3-year terms times 2, so a maximum of 6 from the current basis of 6 1-year term eligibility. So I'd recommend that we go to 3-year terms on a rotating schedule, so the committees refresh themselves every year.
I think we found in putting together our committees this year that there were people who have been on 5 and 6 years, and it's a lot harder to ask them to leave when there's not an obvious turnover, even though they're entitled to only 1-year terms. So the Governance Committee thought that if we normalized it, our 9 RPO members, if there are 9, to be every 3 years rolling, that would give a refreshment. You would, at the end of a term, you could decide whether or not you wanted to include them or not, or whether they wanted to. So
is there a transition issue?
Is there a transition issue?
The Governance Committee is going to figure out, it'll probably take us a few years to get through that, to be on a regular schedule. So a transition plan would be developed following approval of the board to do this.
or changing the bylaws, I think we need to have the transition as part of the bylaws. You know, I mean, you're asking to do something, but you haven't figured out how you're going to implement it.
Well, I mean, if these things are 1 year, if they're 1 year terms,
I'm happy to implement it for my committee as I see fit. Yes.
Well, currently you have, Scott, you're right. Currently you have, all of your members are serving on 1 year terms.
Correct.
So you could, as a chairman, you could appoint 3 of your members.
You pick 3 1s, 3 2s, and 3 3s, and you move
forward. Or three out and 3 new ones.
Correct.
Fine.
Is there any further discussion? Thank you, Scott. David, that's a good point. Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor of amending the bylaws? Any opposition? Seeing none, that passes. We're going past 12H. We are then ratifying, as many folks will remember, Mr. Spear sold his house in August. He did not take possession of his new house until September. We appointed him to fill the vacancy that was created by him selling his house and no longer being a property owner for a month. I'd like a motion. The motion 12I is to ratify the approval of his taking back his seat for the remainder of his term. Is there any discussion? All in favor? Thank you, that passes. Karen, you wanted to skip 12J?
Yes, I'll go ahead and regarding resolution 10J, and it's kind of a 3-part resolution. And the first part, that amendment to the gate pass policy, Hilton Head Preparatory School, and then there's Seapine's businesses, then about a preferred pass. But the Hilton Head Preparatory School, on recommendation of the Gate Entry Committee, amendment to the gate entry policy to permit Hilton Head Prep families to receive more than 1 Hilton Head Prep decal per calendar year. The first Hilton Head Prep decal will be complimentary, as it has been in the past, and all additional Hilton Head Prep decals will be available for a fee of $6 each. The vehicle registration must state the parent or student's name. And so then that'll stand as is. And then the second part with regard to other full-time employees and other, I'd like to amend that slightly to say, further resolve, Community Services Associates, Inc. Board of Directors approves on recommendation of the Gate Entry Committee to permit all businesses located in Sea Pines full-time staff to receive their first employee decal complimentary for each staff member, then all additional decals to be available for a $6 fee. The vehicle registration must state the full name, the full-time employee's name. Then the last part of this is the document, the Community Service Associates Board of Directors approved the recommendation of the Gate Entry Committee amend the gate pass policy, section 9.1, subsection 9.1.1 to read as follows: documented Hilton Head Island residential property owners that desire 24 access to Sea Pines may do so after purchasing the preferred pass. Some people know that as the Pelican Pass. Hilton Head Island residential property owners include those that pay Hilton Head property tax and own an RV site on Hilton Head. And they had been excluded in the past, but since they do pay property tax, they should be granted this opportunity as well. This does not include Sea Pines property owners, Hilton Head plantation owners, or persons that own property on the mainland past James F. Byrne Bridge. So, any questions? Larry?
The first part deals with the Hilton Head Prep student who ends up having to bring his mom's car because his car's in the shop. Similarly,
that's correct.
Similarly for the full-time staff, that they now, if they have 2 cars in the family and they don't have to worry about which car they're bringing to work. And the last one is for, since RV owners who actually park at the RV Motor Coach Resort are paying taxes, we thought it was only fair to allow them to be treated like other tax-paying Hilton Head residents.
That's correct.
Are there discussions? Hearing none, all in favor? Anyone opposed? It passes. We now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 encroachment, 6 encroachment resolutions. 6 encroachment resolutions which we have passed by email. We need to ratify them. Is there any further discussion on any of them?
Does that include the $1,000 fee? Who's that?
That's not part of this.
Okay. These are just the encroachment.
It's permits.
All right.
Hearing none, all in favor? Raise your hand. We'll pass all 6 at one time. Thank you. That's the end of the agenda as I have it. Sandra?
What about K?
Lost the sound.
We only have 5 encroachments. Resolution 12K. Thank you. Resolution 12K is to increase the encroachment agreement application fee to $1,000. We've been doing encroachment application fees truly on the cheap for the party that gets it, and we don't cover anywhere close to our costs. On the recommendation of Mr. Borghese, we'd like to increase that to $1,000.
Second.
Is there any discussion? All in favor, raise your hand. That passes. Now we've gone through all the resolutions that were on the agenda. Is there any other new business anyone need to bring before the board? I want to thank you all for hanging in. It's been a long meeting, but we have a very important group of items to discuss. I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Mr. Richardson, JR, moved. Mr. Richardson, Scott, seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned at 12:58. We are going to take a 7-minute break. We will be back at 1:05. Please be back for questions and answers that we may have received from the community that has been watching. Thank you.
Leaving that meeting.
We're still meeting.
Yeah, you have to change, get the video. So remember, hello, everybody. Again, I'm going to start the Q&A. As I get started, I want to again note that we are going to answer all of the questions that were posed by the residential property owner that posed it. In some cases, there were just comments that we really couldn't find a question. And so those are going to be passed along to all of you for your consideration. And certainly, I'm sure it will come up at the next board meeting, since many of them involve the decisions we made today. So to start with, Doug Harribird, and I apologize if I'm, with the name Muption, I should know better than to butcher people's names, but I apologize if I butchered your name in any way. Why doesn't Sea Pines have a real estate transfer fee? A real estate transfer fee was a subject prior to the last referendum. A survey was done of the residential property owners, and it was based on the survey, there was well over 35 to 40% who were opposed to it. At the time, the sense was that it was not adequately discussed and described to the people, and therefore that's why they didn't like it. It's a true shame we don't have it, because in this real estate market, we would have raised a lot of money. But it requires a referendum to impose a transfer tax. And for the same reason that we don't feel we could do an infrastructure referendum, we're not at this point trying a transfer tax. I am hopeful that within the next year, the board will in fact initiate a referendum for a transfer fee. It goes on the buyer. It rarely, if ever, has any impact on the sale, but it takes education, and it will take an education job. So again, that's a future board, and I do think it's a great idea, and I think most of the members of the board feel that way, but it takes a referendum, and 75% remains a very high hurdle.
And it was not passed when it was in 2007 and 8.
And I'm reminded it was not passed in 2007 when we had a referendum on it. Questions from Bob Quinn. Where in our covenant is the board allowed to turn over raising revenue and or maintaining infrastructure to an outside entity? Well, there's nothing in the covenants that requires that we raise revenue only through a referendum. And the resident property owners who are eligible to vote will be the ones who decide to raise this money and create this district. So from the board's perspective, we don't see this as a covenant issue. We've decided that the 75% required by the covenants is too high a hurdle to do a referendum. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. So I think we are confident, and we have had legal counsel that says we could assist the eligible resident voters in creating a tax district without violating our covenants. Which sources, Mr. Quinn then asks, which sources of revenue to fund infrastructure are still being pursued and which have been rejected, and why? As I indicated and Sam indicated, the Revenue Task Force looked at fees and dues as a potential, which would have been imposed on residential property owners. We didn't think that would raise enough money, realistically. We've looked at potential fees on short-term rentals. Similarly, didn't think we could raise enough money that way. We looked at a variety of potential alternatives for a referendum and could not negotiate something that all parties were willing to pursue that we thought would pass by 75%. And we therefore were left with the special tax district as the most reasonable and most importantly, most viable alternative to pursue. Next, by Mr. Quinn, if the infrastructure needs are to deal with storm surge and other flooding issues close to the ocean, should beach-oriented properties pay more than a villa a mile inland? Well, we didn't really look at it quite that way, but we are using ad valorem, and it is certainly possible that some beach-oriented properties, based on their taxable value, will pay more than villas that are a mile inland. Will the candidates for this year's board election be asked for their views on the special tax district and the various sources of revenue? And will these responses be included in the ballot mailing in November to get a sense of where the community is on each issue? The nominating committee, Mr. Barth, I don't know if you're still on, but I believe you intend to ask a set of questions to each of the candidates, and those will be included in the packet. Barry, you're on.
Yeah, I'm on now. I unmuted. The real issue, the questions are going to come basically from, they're on the website, CPines, or will be on the website, cpinesliving.com. And the candidates will be asked if they want to answer those questions and can put their, can answer those questions. And then it can be raised again by homeowners that are asking questions during the actual meeting.
So yes, they will. Thank you, Barry. Next question is from Barbara Ernie. Why is money being wasted on lawyers and appealing the decision to release the gate agreements and documents? As I indicated earlier in the meeting, because the judge didn't simply say hand over the document, he raised 3 or 4 points of law with which we disagree and which we feel would dramatically impact our operations. We are appealing, and our lawyers believe that we have a reasonable case to appeal.
And we're not paying any additional money.
And we're not paying any lawyers. Thank you. We're not wasting money on lawyers. It's covered by insurance. When will the gate at Tower Beach be fixed and operational? Sam?
The gate itself is fixed, and we are working with the software procurement that Toby mentioned earlier. And once we have that in line, we'll be able to issue the cards with RFID chips in them that will allow the gate to operate using the radio frequency chips. So it's part of that overall process.
Okay. Next is a question from Randy Cianon, which is also similar to a question from Linda Antonelli. Randy asks, what is the status of the building as you make the left into Publix, the old Asian restaurant, which I believe is the gallery shop?
That's the gallery shops.
And Linda Antonelli asks, hello, is the sale of the building property on Greenwood Drive being considered to fund the infrastructure expenses, and if not, why? Well, again, as I indicated earlier, the gallery shops is an asset. So even if we sold it, that would simply increase our cash. It wouldn't increase, and which would, is an asset we already have available. It wouldn't increase necessarily the funds we need to build our infrastructure. That would just reduce our reserve. And as for the sale of the building, as discussed during the meeting, that is among the options that is being considered and will continue to be considered as we make plans for the use of that property. Sam, anything to add to that?
Yes, sir.
Question from Paula Chardon. I'm sorry, question from Arnold Bressler. At the meeting of the ASCO board, there was reference to a recent court case apparently involving CPines, but no details were given. As a non-resident property owner, I had not heard anything about it. What is it about? The case is the case of Advocate versus CSA. Ms. Advocate wants access to the gate agreement that was signed in 2018, pursuant to our policy to maintain confidentiality of all of our third-party agreements. We did not provide it to her. The judge ruled in her favor. We are appealing. Hopefully that provides a short summary of where we are. Question from Paula Chardon. CPine's infrastructure does need updated in order to stay competitive, but I think everyone should pay their appropriate share. As the board considered dividing the properties into sections by dollar amount, multi-million-dollar homes, we're using the ad valorem method and dispatchable tax district. That covers your concern. Thank you for your question. Question from Sue Emke. Who voted for and against the Advocate v. CSA reconsideration appeal? I believe it's safe to say that an overwhelming majority of the board voted to appeal.
Yes, that's unanimous.
Who voted for and against the decision to fund the revenues needed to CPines through a special tax district controlled by Beaufort County Council and not the covenants of CPines? As indicated in today's meeting, the board members present and voting all voted to pursue the special tax district. Also, it's fair to say that any number of the board members discussing it today would have preferred if we could have found a referendum terms that we thought had a reasonable chance of passing, but recognized that we did not. Lastly, what are the sizes of the communities that allow low-speed vehicles? What are the widths of the roads in those communities? And what is the number of miles of roads within each community? Sam, is that something we have? Or Bill Johnson, I know that this is within what you were studying on low-speed vehicles with Toby.
I don't think that we have gotten, I don't want to speak for Bill, but I don't think we've gotten that level of the discernment with this.
No, we haven't dove that deep into it yet. What we were looking at in these low-speed vehicles, so if in fact they are licensed by the state of South Carolina and are legal on public roads with the restrictions that apply to these vehicles, should we comply with that within Sea Pines? Is that fair, Sam?
Yes, that's fair. And I would add to that, Bill, is the a broader conversation about who just property owners and not bringing vehicles in for renters and day guests. And there's a broad range of issues we have to take up associated with that, as well as the legality of it under state law.
Correct.
Thank you, Susan Emke. Last question that was asked during the meeting was from Alex Cruden. What's the estimate of how much a typical Sea Pines homeowner, primary residence, would pay annually under the first year of the tax district, and how much for the typical or median non-resident owner? As we indicated in the meeting, we haven't gotten far enough along to determine exactly what that would be. But as I suggested, if you're trying to get even some sense, and this is by no means a binding thought, you can try applying to your taxable value, which is on your tax bill, which will take into account any exemptions you have, whether you're resident or non-resident, what kind of property you have. And you might try applying a millage rate of 10 and a millage rate of 20. And that probably gives you the spread of what it's likely to be. I think you'll find for many, many homeowners, residential property owners, particularly residents who vote here, that you will find that it is less than the amount of $600, which might have come out of the referendum. Obviously, for the higher value properties and the commercial properties in the resort, it's likely to be more than a fixed $600. A question from David Garvey: will the Sea Pines Resort pay more or less in the new proposed ad valorem taxes versus the fees in the originally proposed referendum? I don't have the answer to that because we haven't calculated it.
But probably not.
Perhaps not, but the answer is the referendum didn't pass. We wish it had. And so we're stuck with what is the best way to raise revenue in a reasonable time frame, and they will pay whatever the ad valorem rate is on their properties. And that will stick. Next comes from Sue Emke. It's more in the nature of a comment, but it ends up being a question. A drop-off area for the beach, who is going to use that? Day trippers, Myrtle Beach, or the Beach Club? Our goal is the idea of additional drop-off areas along North and South Sea Pines develops out of the concern that as more and more rental properties in the Greenwood Forest and Heritage area and Club Course are now going into short-term rental. They're really, and with short-term rental properties not being allowed to park consistent with the policies of the Beach Club at closer to the Beach Club, a number of families found it useful without a drop-off area to drive down, drop off the family with all of the stuff, and then have someone drive the car back to the rental property and bike down. And then they bike back up the car. As you can imagine, it's a long walk with kids and stuff. So we found that a number of areas along Beach Walk 24 and 26 were being used where there is some drop off. This is something we're going to study from a safety perspective, from what makes sense for a good short-term rental, and recognizing as we have more and more rental properties and the Beach Club is not available in Tower Beach, we don't want Tower Beach to be available. And we don't want them necessarily filling up South Beach Marina with cars that are used for the beach. This is a way to allow them to get to the beach, use those beach walks that are available to everyone. But it's a matter of study. And so If we do it, we will certainly be sensitive to not allowing day trippers to come into the property and use it to get to our beaches. They'll have to come all the way from Caligny and walk down to the beach to get there because, of course, our beaches are public. So I hope I answered that. Looking through one other point, one man opposed the ban of gas leaf blowers brought on by ASPO. ASPO did in fact adopt a policy on leaf blowers. It has not come to CSA's attention. CSA has not taken action on leaf blowers. We welcome your comments and concerns if you have them, and we will take them into account if the matter comes up to us. Looking through, most of the other folks who have written to us on the comment were comments, did not raise questions. All of those comments will be addressed to the board, and the board will certainly take your comments into consideration as we move forward. With that, I again thank everyone for hanging in as long as you did. To the folks who are watching us on the live stream, thank you for your participation, whether you're watching it now or watching it in the future. We appreciate your watching the board in action, and we hope we have provided you some information that will be useful in terms of our input. And we welcome your comments and concerns and questions at comments@csacpines.com. Board members, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
We are
Thank you, Larry.
total adjournment.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you all.